And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to the live edition of the 2023 Film Room Mock Draft. I have my wonderful co-host of the Bootleg Football Podcast that we've been doing for several years. I'm sure you all know that by now. EJ Snyder here with me in Kansas City. First time we've been doing this from the actual location of the draft. We rented out, I guess, a mansion is the best way to describe. I mean, it's literally called the Armor Mansion, but not the whole thing. Top floor of the mansion. There are other guests below us, but we wanted a place that we could be comfortable and set up to do. I don't know, 25 hours of live streams over the next 4 days.
A lot of content for the NFL draft, but it's pretty cool to be in the host city. It's already starting to ramp up. Kansas City, if you haven't been here, is a gorgeous place. My first exposure to the city, driving around yesterday, walking around the neighborhoods. Beautiful, beautiful city. Happy to be here. And it's just going to go up from here. You flew in late last night. DM me. Rich Eisen's on my flight. Like, it's happening. The NFL world is descending on Kansas City. And this is our first piece of content, but certainly not our last.
Yeah, we are on 3.5 hours of sleep. No food. Or no real food.
Very little food.
We're gonna go grab some barbecue after this, and then we have our remember Q&A portion. We're not doing really Q&A here. We're just sticking to the mock draft, but we will be doing Q&A on our Draftsmas Eve stream over on the Bootleg Football Podcast channel, which starts at
4 o'clock Central.
5 Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. Time is a construct for me today, EJ. I am running on fumes. And then after that, 7 to 9 p.m. local time in Kansas City. If you're in the area, we're going to be down at KC Bier Co. Pretty close to us, just south of downtown, I would say. Yep. We're going to have some beers, talk football, meet as many of you as we possibly can. But with that being said, EJ, we're going to start with this mock, and I want to lay out a descriptor for what I'm trying to accomplish here. This is the first year I'm doing trades. I usually never do trades, but this year I felt compelled to because the mock would not make sense if I didn't do trades. It's too weird of a class to not have trades. Secondly, it's sort of a predictive mock, but mostly not. There are some things that I felt comfortable predicting, and so I wanted to do, especially as we get deeper into the first round and things get a little bit more jank, right? I wanted to incorporate what I would do for those mostly in the back half of the first round. But I feel pretty strongly about what's gonna happen in the top 10 or so, or top 15 or so.
Ooh.
And so, and most of it lines up with what I would do anyway, so it's fine. But I wanted to have kind of the first half be relatively accurate to set up the scenarios for the back half where I kind of go on really what I would like. There's going to be some weird ass picks in the back half of the first round.
Couple of tangents coming.
I will. There's a certain DB that I will defend to the death, and we will get there when we get there. It'll be a long mock, but so we're going to start this off with pick number 1. Panthers taking Bryce Young. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point. And it's the same pick I would make if I was the Panthers. Bryce Young's my top-rated quarterback. I get the size is a concern for some people, especially when it comes to can he hold up in a 17-game season with that frame. I think that the likelihood of him getting hurt is not as bad as people make it out to be, because he's very good under pressure. He's very good at avoiding pressure. He's very good at avoiding taking monster hits. And even when he did take some monster hits in the SEC, he popped right back up and he was mostly fine. When you look at the accuracy, the touch, timing, anticipation, pocket presence, football IQ, character, everything, it's all off the charts. It's very similar profile to Joe Burrow, just smaller. And I think if I was the Panthers and I had to make a pick that would not get me fired, I would take Bryce Young because I feel safest about it. What say you?
No pick in the draft is safe. There just isn't such a thing as a safe pick. There are picks that are safer and picks that are less safe. Bryce Young is a safe pick for so many reasons, because the conversation always turns to size, sometimes immediately, which I think is terrible and wrong, because all the other things we go, yeah, all that other stuff, the quarterbacking stuff, that's great, but he's small. And I'm like, you're burying the lead. You're skipping the important stuff. The fact that he does have touch, timing. You talked about anticipation. We had JT O'Sullivan on Bootleg, and he talks about big A anticipation or little A anticipation. Bryce has got big A anticipation. You'll see him let go of the ball well before receivers leave their breaks. He's got that playmaking component that I was just going back and I was watching Jahmyr Gibbs last night, and that late play against Texas, right? He makes that at the split second before the guy's hand touches his jersey. And you saw that over and over again. It wasn't an isolated incident. He's such a good quarterback that's what you're getting. That's why you're investing the first overall pick. He's going to get smacked. And the NFL is bigger and faster, and it is a concern. But the SEC is the biggest, fastest league in college. He survived there. He was able to somewhat mitigate the damage. We'll see when he takes that first blind shot, because he will. But all the other stuff you're getting in between is why he goes first overall.
Now, the other issue that should be talked about, and I included it in my little blurb when I did my position rankings. By the way, if you're a patron, I dropped offensive position rankings this morning. I have yet to finish all the blurbs on those guys, and it's literally just I'm giving you guys my cheat sheet that I'm going to be using while we do the draft live streams over on the Bootleg channel, because we're going to be live for every single pick, and I need something to read off of, and so that's literally my cheat sheet. I'm just putting on Patreon, but the blurb that I wrote for Bryce included the fact that his drop depth can cause some issues. And again, he's a shorter guy, and we saw it with Kyler. We saw it with Russ. They like to hang 9-10 yards deep back in the pocket so that they can see better, especially when it comes to, finding throwing lanes over the middle. And that can cause difficulty for tackles with bad feet, because it's a much easier angle if you're trying to flatten down at 10 yards than flatten down at 8 yards for an edge rusher. So if your tackle's at bad feet, they're in for a bad
long day.
Luckily for Carolina, they got Ike Ekwonu, so that's not as big of an issue for the Panthers as it would be for some other teams. It wouldn't be an issue for the Texans either, because they have Laramie Tunsil. But Bryce Young, I think, would not do as well on a team with shitty tackles. I know, hot take, but that specifically is the reason why. So it's not a reason not to draft him, but it is a slight knock.
Something to be concerned with, and we should say that as we go through all these picks have something to be concerned with. There are no perfect prospects. Doesn't matter what the position is. All players moving from college to the NFL have things that are concerns, things to work on, and it's just how comfortable you are with them, or in the case of Carolina, how you would mitigate that with your other personnel and how that's a fit or not.
Yeah. And I mean, even Caleb next year, he's close, but even he is like not entirely all the way there yet. He's better than almost everybody else I've ever seen, but he's still not entirely all the way there yet. All right, getting to number 2, Texans on the clock. I want to start off by saying this. I am not an insider. I do not post news ever, even when I learn of things. But again, it happened again today because of a John McClain tweet saying Will Levis is going number 2, and his odds shot up way again. People are throwing down dumb money on Will Levis going 2. I have not heard, and I've checked in with 9 people on this. None of them have Will Levis going 2. None of them. All of them have Will Anderson going 2.
Yeah, the other Will.
The other Will. And it's completely justified. Will Anderson is incredible, and we'll get to him in just a second. But I want to stress this. From media sources to people around the league to people connected with people in the organization, none of them have Will Levis going 2. Even CAA, his agency, doesn't know where that's coming from. and they would love for him to go too. But even
For
they're like,
sure.
we don't expect that.
Yeah.
So stop throwing down dumb money on Will Levis going to. And again, I'm giving it like a 0.5% chance. But everybody that I have talked to for like a month is saying no way.
You know why I hope it doesn't happen?
Why?
Because I would have to do the rest of the draft live stream solo. You would like throw your hat out the window and leave, probably go straight to the airport and
I'm
say,
done.
"Screw
I'm
it.
flying home,
It's
man.
over."
I'm flying home.
So I hope it doesn't happen for that reason. I don't think it'll happen either. But who'd you pick for the Texans?
So I took Will Anderson because I'm A, they're not sold on Levis. B, looking at the power structure of this organization, they come from either the Niners or the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
These are two organizations that historically have had a lot of success building the roster first and then plopping quarterbacks into it. Now, they got lucky for a long time in New England. They had Tom Brady, but
Certainly helps.
It certainly helps. But, they knew they could win with Jimmy G. They knew they could win with Jacoby Brissett, and they did those things before.
Mm-hmm.
They took Mac Jones at like, was it 14 or whatever, and they were a good team because they had a good roster around Mac Jones. And then you look at the San Francisco side, again, they won a lot of games with Jimmy Garoppolo. They won with Brock Purdy. They won with almost everybody for the last 5 years because they had the roster. They had the defense, they had the pass rush, they had the offensive line, they had weapons, they had everything. And so I think the power structure, and I agree with this take, by the way, the power structure truly believes that you can win with almost any quarterback as long as the roster can make that quarterback work. And I mean, you and I have talked extensively about this on the pod where like the number one factor in whether or not a quarterback succeeds is talent around them. Trevor Lawrence did not have a good situation around him as a rookie, didn't look good at all, had a good situation second year. All of a sudden he looks like a top 10 quarterback, top 8 quarterback even. So I agree with the power structure, the power at B here with the Texans of build the roster first, plop in a quarterback later. And for that reason, I'm going Will Anderson because they do not have like an alpha pass rusher. They haven't had one since JJ, and they desperately need one. Will Anderson is about as safe an edge prospect as I've seen in the last several years. In terms of ceiling, he doesn't have Tyree Wilson's ceiling, but the floor, like at minimum, he's a good starter.
Yeah.
And he's incredibly productive, amazing football character, like technical development well beyond his years. He's 21 years old and he already uses his hands like a 5-year vet, converts speed to power well, despite not being the biggest guy, plays the run, super tough. He's safe. And I think the Texans, and again, I agree with this, they just want to hit doubles right now. And if you hit enough doubles, you can plop in, a non-elite quarterback and still go to a Super Bowl. They believe that. I believe that. So I think Will Anderson's the guy.
Yeah, if they're not sold on a quarterback, if there's not a guy there that they believe will compel their franchise past that, there isn't any reason to avoid a guy like Will Anderson. He's got experience inside and outside, played for Nick Saban. The way he plays, I'm with you. You would think he's one of these 24 or 25-year-old guys that's been soaking up NIL money and, is a 6th year or 7th year super senior by the way he plays, but he's literally just old enough to drink. You see good power setting the edge for the run. Not great, but certainly solid, really good technical refinement in terms of leverage, wins in different ways. So it isn't like he fills one role for the Texans and they're going to put him in that role. And that's it's not like he's a situational edge rusher or that they're going to have to scheme him up a lot. In Alabama this year, they schemed him up less. They dropped him inside. He was playing 4-eye as opposed to edge. Our buddy Charles McDonough had a great interview with him yesterday where he said, what's the difference between lining up at 4-eye? Those of you that don't know technique numbers, that's inside the tackle shoulder as opposed to lining up out wider. And Will Anderson talked about the difference of having space, things happening just a tick slower. But he's done all that.
Mhm.
So the Texans are going to be able to move that front. They're going to be able to do 4-man surface, 5-man surface. They're going to be able to split him out wide. They're going to be able to throw him inside on the old NASCAR package if they need to. And he's going to be productive everywhere. So in terms of safety for a pick, you're getting high level floor, pretty high ceiling too. I think a lot of times when we say, oh, if the floor is high, the ceiling can't be high too. I'm not so sure that's true with Will Anderson. Is the ceiling as high from a physical gift standpoint as a guy like Tyree Wilson? No, but Tyree Wilson's coming in with a lower floor, so the variance is higher. Will Anderson, you talked about hitting doubles. He's somewhere between a double and a triple.
Yeah, and again, I feel confident that Will Anderson's not going to be a bad player.
Yeah,
like ever. Like he's going to be.
If he is, it'll be shocking.
It'll be stunning. And we say all the time, like, you know, having a 10-year career is rare in the NFL. He's one of the only guys in this class where I'm like, yeah, he's probably going to play 10 years. And that's, again, that doesn't happen for more than a handful of guys in each draft class.
Yep.
So I feel very confident about Will Anderson, and I'm sure the Texans do too. I think their grade on him is probably pretty monstrous. Now,
you hope.
somewhat shocking at pick 3. And this is kind of a combination of what I expect to happen and also what I would do if I was this team. Because looking at the landscape of their roster, financial considerations for the future, desperately trying to get over the hump, but never quite getting there, and needing a big swing to get there. And I think they're in a very similar spot to the Chiefs were roughly 6 years ago when they went up and got Pat Mahomes, because they needed to get over the hump. They had a solid starter, but they just couldn't get there all the way. And so with the 3rd overall pick, I have the Minnesota Vikings going way up to 3. It's going to be at minimum 3 first-round picks. We'll see if there's multiple seconds thrown in there, but I don't think you do this type of deal going up that far, going from 23 to 3 for a quarterback without 3 first-round picks. I think they're willing to pay that price because they need the upside and the potential of Anthony Richardson. Yes, I do have him going ahead of CJ Stroud. It does not mean that I don't love CJ Stroud. What it means is that for the Vikings situation, being able to sit Anthony Richardson behind Kirk Cousins for a year, where he can learn and grow and develop. He's a real smart kid. He's just really inexperienced. He hasn't played a lot of college football. It doesn't mean that, you know, people say, oh, he doesn't read coverage as well. You haven't watched Florida clearly at all. And it's like, he's you know, really raw in the pocket. No, he's got better pocket presence than Will Levis. He's inaccurate. Not really. No, his ball placement's pretty good. Again, I think he's more accurate than Will Levis. He's not as accurate as CJ Stroud, but when you also look at the concepts that they made him run at Florida, it was a lot of downfield shot plays that are lower percentage balls. And I don't want to bring up the Josh Allen comparison, but it was a similar thing at Wyoming for Josh Allen, where it's like, Josh, just throw 30 yards down the field 12 times a game and see how many you can complete. Very similar thing for Anthony Richardson. He has unlimited talent. And I am a proponent of when somebody has that much natural talent and they're a coachable kid that's hungry to learn and hungry to grow, you bet on that. Because honestly, if they stuck with what they have now and they kept striking out in the divisional round over and over and over again, who cares? Like, we're trying to win Super Bowls here, and I just don't see them getting to that level. And this is nothing against Kirk Cousins. He had a great year last year. He's a good quarterback.
Yep.
But you know, in the NFC, you can get through the NFC, or at least most of the NFC. You got to deal with the Eagles. You know, you got to deal with a couple other Niners. You got to deal with that. But like, you go to the Super Bowl, it's like, oh, who are we playing against? Probably Mahomes or Burrow or Herbert or Lawrence or fucking Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Like, you're going up against serial killers in the AFC. You need one to compete. And I think that the Vikings should take a big swing here, give up the picks they need to give up, go get themselves potentially their own elite level quarterback that can get there in a couple years.
It's a fascinating move for a few reasons. There are certainly echoes of what the Vikings done in the past with Dante Culpepper, right? They would be getting another huge quarterback that could really move and has a very big arm. Let's go through some of the concerns about Richardson, because nobody's concerned about his size. Let's start off with the Bryce Young conversation. Nobody's concerned about his ability to run. It's elite. It's the best in this class, and it's the best for a year or two. It's people have compared it to Justin Fields, his ability to take off and gain yards with his legs in multiple ways, power, moves, whatever. You talked about pocket presence. If you watch Florida's film, he moves very well in the pocket. He has a lot of subtle movements in the pocket that I didn't expect. I expected his pocket movement, presence, sort of just awareness, that sixth sense in the pocket to be much less developed than it was, given that he hasn't started a lot of games.
He's barely started.
And it's good now. So that's not a concern. Accuracy is the one I want to talk about because it comes up a lot. And you will see Anthony Richardson be very accurate and then be not very accurate. So it's more consistency than it is accuracy. He can be accurate, and he is fairly often. Then you'll see inconsistency. Largely, I think it comes from his footwork. To me, that's exciting because I think that's correctable. And a lot of it's on what I would call layup throws that when we were talking to JT O'Sullivan's like, you got to hit that, right? 9 times out of 10, you just got to hit that unconscious. You gotta machine it into
It's timing.
It's timing. It's muscle memory. Yeah. It's doing it the same way. But the one that kills me is we always have this accuracy conversation. We say, oh, this person is accurate and this person isn't. And what I loved about our conversation when we talked about quarterbacks this year is that like breaking that into levels. Well, accurate where? Accurate how? At what level of the field? And one of the things that very rarely comes up is average depth of target. You talked about it. I love that. Richardson's is second highest among the top quarterbacks, only behind Hendon Hooker, who, if you're looking at Tennessee, right, it's bombs away at Tennessee, right? Yeah. But Hendon Hooker's ADOT, average depth of target, 12 yards. Richardson's 11.6.
With worse receivers. Like
much worse.
They had 2 top 50 picks at receiver at Tennessee. They had a first-round tackle. Like they had an offense that was just bonkers in terms of scheme and design and everything like that with deep choice. Anthony Richardson, they're recruiting, they're building the program, but they're not there yet.
Yeah.
And he's still made it work.
Yeah. So you see the offensive line, which causes him to move, which causes that accuracy to crop up. And I've had a lot of Florida fans in my mention saying, you don't watch tape. You didn't. I watched every snap of Florida and he's all over the place. Yeah, sometimes he is, but not all the time. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you see somebody that can't do it, that's one thing. That's an inaccurate quarterback. And we've seen those. They can't hit it. He can hit it. And he needs to bring that level of accuracy on a consistent basis. If he does, all the other things are good. The size, the movement ability in the pocket, out of the pocket, the arm strength. He can throw 45 yards off any arm angle flat. Mm-hmm. That's what Minnesota doesn't have. It would be a massive move. Obviously, it would shake up the entire first round. The cost would be staggering. It is a coach firing, GM cleaning kind of move. If it works, you're a genius and you probably end up playing.
If it works, you coach there forever.
Right. You're a hero.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, you're probably out in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Because it has to work.
And we're going to be optimists and say that it will.
I want to see it work. And, with the coach they have in Minnesota right now, Kevin O'Connell understands quarterbacks. So we talk about landing spot and the importance of that all the time. It's as good a landing spot, I think, as could be. He doesn't have to play right away, has a coach that understands quarterbacks. He has receivers. We just talked about Hendon Hooker versus, Richardson at Florida. Like, come on, you're going into Justin Jefferson. They're going to continue to invest in the position. It's a good spot. It would be fun. It would be crazy. It would be fun.
Now, at 4, again, there is another quarterback that is still on the board, luckily for the Colts. One that I think they would sprint the card up.
Yeah.
And that's going to be CJ Stroud from Ohio State. arguably the most, in terms of just pure accuracy from within the pocket, touch, timing, anticipation, all that. Arguably the most accurate quarterback in this class. I think he throws a gorgeous ball, just the most aesthetically pleasing spiral on a back shoulder fade in this class by far. And it reminds me, and this is a very common comp because I think, and maybe he doesn't get enough credit for this. Jared Goff, again, super aesthetically pleasing deep ball, and it reminds me a lot of Jared Goff in terms of just how he throws, but with added mobility. And that's a deadly thing because I think CJ doesn't get enough credit for his legs. Like, you could legitimately design running plays for him and he'd be a threat. Ohio State didn't have to, so they didn't do it that much, but there were some zone reads here and there, and he would break off some big runs on scrambles here and there. And then we saw, against Georgia and to a slightly lesser degree against Iowa, when he was under pressure and he was able to kind of be like an explosive short area mover in the pocket and get out of stuff and get outside the pocket and throw a platform. He didn't have to do that a lot at Ohio State, but he showed he could. My main knock on him is sometimes he lets the ball go before processing things, like especially over the middle. I think sometimes the anticipation, to use a Ben Solak phrase, gets a little too much dip on his chip, where he's letting the ball go before he's actually looking and seeing, oh God, Jack Campbell's dropping in the hook zone. Maybe I shouldn't throw that. Like, I think he just needs to either quicken his eyes or slow down everything else so that he just checks before he hits. It's like one's gone, two's gone. Now let me hit three over the middle. He just kind of assumes that's going to be there. It's not always going to be there, especially against NFL quality linebackers. So that's like the one thing is either slow down or speed up, one of those two.
Pick one.
But just be more cautious when like throwing a backside dig or like a late crosser or something like that. Other than that, though, I don't really have any problems with CJ Stroud, like at all. I think he's an easy top 5 pick, and he's a starting caliber quarterback, and he's going to win the job in Indy, and they're going to be fine.
Yeah, CJ Stroud's a very good player. He, unfortunately, I don't know how they assign this, but he drew the shortest straw this year. He is the guy that people are picking apart and throwing up all kinds of late criticism on. And I think it's unfair. I think it's unnecessary. CJ Stroud, very, very good quarterback, great size, really good athlete, throws better, I think, than anybody else in this class from the pocket. People talk about the quality of his receivers as if that was a detriment. If you look at them, it's not like they're having to reach all over the field and catch balls.
Yeah.
Yes, Marvin Harrison can make crazy catches. He didn't have to most of the time.
Mm-mm.
Neither did the rest of the receiver core. It hit them in the chest or directly in the hands. And if we're going to go to the quality of his teammates being a detriment, it's the offensive line. There's 3 guys off that offensive line that are going to go in this draft. 2 more that are going to go in the next couple drafts. He didn't have to deal with muddy pockets very much. So Richardson, muddy pockets all the time. We got to see that pocket movement. It's not that Stroud can't move in the pocket. He hasn't been forced to. And it leads into those processing moments. Things seem to speed up a little bit for him when the pocket gets muddy. And he hasn't yet risen to the occasion often. Now, you talked about roster building around him. If he goes to the Colts, they've built a pretty good roster. They need some more help. He's probably going to have more pressure playing in a Colts jersey than he did playing in a Buckeyes jersey.
Probably, yeah.
So we'll see about that. It doesn't mean he can't. It's just like everybody with his running ability said, he's not a good runner. He's not a good runner. They haven't used him as a runner. Comes out against Georgia, goes, oh yeah, bet I am.
And that's the thing is I'm kind of hanging my hat on the Georgia game where it's like we never saw him in a muddy pocket except against Georgia. And he handled it really well. So it's like, I've seen him do it. I think he can do it again.
So I think this is a really justified pick. They have a roster that needs to be unlocked. They have been chasing quarterback for a few years. He's there, the value, the need, they line up. And I want to see what he can do because I always root for the guy. It was Justin Fields the year Justin Fields came out. It's CJ Stroud this year. They both happen to go to Ohio State. I don't think that's connected, but CJ Stroud's the one that's catching all the strays through the late pre-draft process. And I just don't see why. He's very good in so many phases. Yes, he has things to develop on. We just talked about that. But they all do. And what you're starting with, just like Will Anderson, the floor of CJ Stroud is starting pro quarterback.
Which I think Indy is
desperate for.
Absolutely willing to. I mean, if they need to go with Gardner Minshew, they'll go with Gardner Minshew. But like, if CJ just,
yeah, they will. You said sprint to the podium. It'll be a track meet to get that card up there.
Now, before I get to pick 5, I do want to remind folks, if you have any questions on either this mock so far or day 2 guys or day 3 guys, we actually talked about a couple day 3 guys over on the podcast. We dropped an episode with Matt Bowen from ESPN yesterday, talking about a bunch of down the board guys. But if you have any questions about any of this, we're doing a Draftsmas Eve Q&A live stream over on the Bootleg channel today, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and then we're going over to KC Bier Co after that. So if you have any burning questions, stop by for that. We'd be happy to answer everything. And also we have, if you are not subscribed to the pod, we have more draft content than I could possibly describe over the last 3 months over there. We have episodes coming out every week, a bunch of interviews, all that stuff. So
I gotta say the Bowen pod that we dropped late last night, because
I thought it came out so good.
Matt Bowen's one of my favorite people. He's a tremendous analyst. He was a player. Then he made himself into an analyst when he graduated from the NFL. He was like, what am I going to do? And he's like, I want to be an analyst, but basically went back to school, figured out how to write professionally, did that at a very high level, got hired at ESPN, then said, I want to coach. Has gone on to coach a very successful high school program, has won 4 championships. So he's got player, he's got analyst, he's got coach. He just has such a well-rounded perspective. I love his insight, and I thought he was so generous with his time. One of my favorite pods that we did, and we did some great ones this year, but that one I felt great about it.
We have him on every year, and it's always it's a great interview. Go watch it after this. All right, Seahawks. This is the great Jalen Carter question.
The great Jalen Carter question. I love it.
This is another one of these, both what I would do and also what I expect to happen. And it's not Jalen Carter. And I think the Seahawks have proven over the last few years that they're trending towards being risk averse when it comes to off-field stuff. And that worked out very well for them last year.
Yes, it did.
They drafted a whole bunch of team captains and high character guys who also happen to be freaks. Cough, cough, Tariq Woolen. And they were a playoff team, and they won a trade after trading away their starting quarterback. And I think I think they're going to stick with that of, let's take kids that we believe in both on and off the field.
Yep. And
if we miss out on a couple elite talents here and there, fine, because we're going to have a bunch of really, really good players anyway. And I think that, to me, leads to Tyree Wilson. You are a Seattle Seahawks. Oh, no, my diffusion on my light just fell down. Holy shit. Anyway, Tyree Wilson. You are a Seattle Seahawk. Also an elite physical talent in his own right. Now, Jalen Carter is a one of one, but Tyree Wilson ain't that far behind in terms of physical gifts. Overwhelming length, power, flexibility for his size is outrageous. He has every tool you could want as an edge rusher, and it's not that dissimilar to Trayvon Walker last year, who went first overall, and Tyree's going to go 5. And I think that when you hire a coach like BT Jordan to come in and specifically turn your pass rushers into monsters, you want to give him the best ball of clay possible to work with. That's going to be Tyree Wilson. He has unimpeachable character on and off the field. Everybody who's ever been around him raves about him, which again, I think is, considering how the Malik McDowell thing blew up in their face, I think that really was the turning point in their pivot for how they approach the draft now. And this is so far removed from the Malik McDowell situation. It's the exact opposite of the Malik McDowell situation. So taking an elite physical talent that also has unimpeachable character, that can play in multiple spots, anything from a 4-eye out to a 9, stand up, 3-point stance, 4-point stance, doesn't even matter. Everything just screams Seahawk to me about Tyree Wilson. And short of Anthony Richardson being on the board, which he's not in this mock, short of that, I don't see anybody other than Tyree Wilson being this pick.
Yeah, I think there's been connection to Richardson. In your scenario, the Vikings make a huge swing, come up, take him off the board. If Tyree Wilson's there, it feels very much like the Will Anderson pick to Houston. Feels like what you should do. Your need is there. I love, capital letters, love Tyree Wilson as a player this year. I think he is a little bit in they say betwixt and between, like Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. Will Anderson, top edge. Jalen Carter, possibly top player based off tape in the draft. And Tyree Wilson's just sort of in this sort of no man's land. And I don't think that's right at all. The first time I watched him, I was like, wow, he's huge. Like, he is just tall and broad, really long arms, big power. And you think, oh, okay, he's a big power defensive end. Then he steps out a few paces and bends around some tackle at that size and just whoops some speed, straight up speed. You're like, okay, what does he not have? And the farther you go into his tape, the answer becomes almost nothing.
Yeah. He's like a little raw, but that's about it.
Yeah. And again, if you land him in a spot with a coach who is prepared to know that and say, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I don't need the highest level of hand usage. I don't need the highest level of counter moves. I can teach you that. What I need is raw power, size, speed, bend. Let's go. That feels like such a fit. And just selfishly, I'll get to see him a lot if he's in the Pacific Northwest. And that would be awesome. He's one of my favorite players in this draft.
Now that brings up the Lions at 6. And this is one of the picks I've gone back and forth on the most because I considered Jalen Carter heavily. With the locker room they have and the culture they have, I thought that would be good for Jalen to go there. And I thought that if there was a place that could kind of nurture him and grow him into what I think he can be, Detroit would be an option there. But considering the trade of Jeff Okudah, I think corner is probably top of mind over there. And there are 2 excellent corners at the top of this class that both are worthy of the pick. I did a mock draft episode specifically for the Lions not too long ago where I gave them Devin Witherspoon, and I struggled between Witherspoon and Gonzalez a lot for this pick. And going back to when we did the 10 gems on defense episode for Bootleg, Gonzalez was my top corner gem. Witherspoon was your top corner gem. And I made the comparison of if you need to do everything DB, who's nickel, who's safety, corner, all that, Witherspoon. If you just need a pure cover corner, I argued back then, and I maintain it now, Christian Gonzalez. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I think the Lions, they're fine at safety. They're more than fine at safety. They're great at safety. They're more than fine, I think, in terms of safeties that can also play nickel. And so I was like, I think what they really need is a pure cover corner, which to me is Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. He has absurd physical talent. Every tool you could ever want. It's comparable to Sauce and Stingley last year in terms of physical gifts. Now, is he as consistent as Sauce was at Cincinnati? No. Is he as productive as Sauce was at Cincinnati? Sort of. Like, there was a lot of ball production, everything like that, but Sauce just never gave up anything on top of having ball production. So it's not quite the same, but it's not far off. But I think, looking at his growth on tape, and if you watch the Georgia game and then you watch, the Stanford game, and you're kind of progressing, and you watch in order, chronological order throughout the season, you could see him learn from mistakes he made earlier in the year and improve and improve and improve. He was already a great player, but he just got better and better and better. Like specifically, as an example, there's a back shoulder fade that Georgia got him on early in the season. It was like week 1. And you could tell that he played back shoulder fades differently after that. It wasn't just I'm gonna be like a yard and a half off and read out the hips in case I'm playing for a double move. Like no, he got chest to chest. He played it aggressively. He played it like an NFL corner is supposed to, which is getting in the receiver's face so that you can reach across and play the back shoulder. And trying to stay too far over the top and read it out and be cute, it's just going to get you beat. And so he learned from that, and he wasn't giving up back shoulder fades anymore. And like Stanford tried it like 3 times on him, and he wouldn't give up anything. So I love the in-season growth and development and learning from mistakes on top of the physical talent. He's a tremendous cover corner. Again, Witherspoon, I think, is the more versatile DB. But if we just need corner, for me, it's Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah, I think there's other differences between those two players as well. Size is an obvious one. Witherspoon is not as big as you think. He certainly plays bigger than his frame, more physically aggressive. I want to go back to what you said about Gonzalez and the way he learns, because we talk about players progressing. We talk about some of that through coaching, some of that through learned experience. This happened and I did this and now I need to do something else. Gonzalez learns so quickly.
Yeah.
He does it like once and he goes, I didn't like that. I'm going to do it differently. And he has the physical talent to pay that off. There are very few people that can learn like that and then just the next time just do it differently. But he's so talented, so fluid, has the size, like you said, every athletic gift. When you say Sauce and Stingley, I cringe a little bit because mentally both of those guys were further along than Gonzalez. Gonzalez is just young in approach. He has equal physical talent to those guys, if not maybe even greater, which is a crazy thing to say because both of those guys are really top level athletes, but he learns so quickly. And that progression, it's one of the few players that I would highly recommend watching in order. I think skipping around has benefits with some other players and sort of picking high games and low games with him. And it's like, he learned it there and he never did it again.
Yes.
He did it there and he never did it again. He did it there. And on the next play, he did it differently and he never did it again. And that to me just sort of makes me so excited for him as a pro because he's going to continue to learn and grow and soak things up from coaches and veteran teammates and everything else. But it's so fast. And the ceiling athletically, pretty unlimited. He's already playing with so much more aggression that I think in a year or two, we might look back and say, he's going to be one of those guys in hindsight. We say, how did he slip? But it was a case of where he was and it just kept going up.
He's like a Terminator. Like every time you kill him, he comes back with a new version that's better and harder to get
and fast
very fast. All right. Now at 7 for the Raiders, there's going to be a theme basically starting from around here through the rest of the first round.
Now
we have not had tackle go yet. There will be a lot of tackles. And even though this is not the deepest tackle class, in fact, it's not a deep tackle class at all. When I sketched up this mock draft late last night, I think I got done with it at like 3 a.m. Local time. I had 7 tackles in the first round and only 5 edges. And this is a historically good edge class and a not super great tackle class.
And that's why.
And that is why. Because teams, if you're on the board and you're like, I could take Derek Hall, but I'm going to get Felix 15 picks later. It's like, but I also need a tackle. Matthew Bergeron's on the board. I can't get anything comparable to him later. That's why it ended up that way. And I think the Raiders are the point where we could start to see the tackle run. I don't have it starting here, but if they take either Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski, I would not be surprised at all. Again, that is a power structure that loves to invest in the trenches early on. They could stand to invest in the trenches now. Wouldn't be surprised. However, we talked about him just 1 pick ago. I have almost equivalent grades on Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez. Again, they're just different players. And I think if Devin Witherspoon is there at 7, considering the division the Raiders are in, You can't survive in that division without DBs that can handle just getting shelled all day long. You need guys that can hold up. And I think that particularly for the Raiders, I think their offensive line needs can be more solved with investing in day 2 interior players. Because I think Dylan Parham was played out of position last year. You move him around, you draft another guy. Like, I think honestly their problems can be fixed by drafting Chandler Zavala in the second round. I don't necessarily think they have to invest in Peter Skoronski at 7, especially if they think he's a guard. I would rather draft Zavala on day 2 to fix the interior and come out with an elite corner, or rather an elite overall DB prospect with Devin Witherspoon, who can play anything they need him to. They have good safeties with Merrick and Epps. They have a great nickel with Hobbs. So he would play outside as a rookie. But if somebody goes down, I don't feel bad about putting Witherspoon inside to replace Hobbs if Hobbs goes down.
No.
If they lose a safety, you could put Witherspoon at safety, and he would be elite at it. So just kind of having this jack of all trades DB where we're just getting our best 5 on the field at nickel and we figure it out from there, I think it's immensely valuable in this division, knowing in the back of my head that we can still address offensive line for the type of offensive lineman they need on day 2.
Yeah. First, we'll talk about the tackle run. Hasn't started yet in your mock draft. The things on the plane on the way down here yesterday that just came more and more clear to me is that once the tackle run starts, it's gonna go off.
Quickly.
There is going to be bloodletting in the tackle market once somebody picks one, because teams are going to go, I got to go now. I got to go up. I got to get what I get, because other than that, I'm getting, and there's a drop. And people will talk about where that plateaus and where the drop starts. It's 6-ish, 7-ish deep. And at that point, you're really picking somebody that you're probably not going to start on day 1. And if you need somebody that has a chance to compete or start on day 1, you're going to have to go get them. And it's going to be from that 7 or 8 is about where it's going to kick off. And within the next, honestly, 10 picks, we're going to see 4 or 5 tackles go off the board. It's going to be tackle, other player, tackle, other player. And it's going to surprise a lot of people. But there just isn't anything after that. There are more interior players in this draft. There are more edges in this draft. There are more corners in this draft, right? But Witherspoon separates himself because he's got an elite floor. He plays at an extremely high level right now. He was the alpha in a secondary full of alphas. 3 out of the 4 of those guys are getting drafted in this draft. He was the unquestioned leader. Matt Bowen said, I want him in the room because he sets the tone for your entire secondary. Plays like a Raider. I know that's a played out phrase and maybe not as applicable currently as it used to be. This might turn the needle back towards that, and it would not be a bad thing. Witherspoon's demeanor in the way that he attacks receivers, ball carriers in general, even at his 180 plus-ish pound size, you wouldn't know it. You'd think he's 205. He hits like a hammer, super aggressive, technically refined, high-level athlete. Feels a bit like Will Anderson at corner, right?
Yeah, you're very confident that you're not going to miss. Very confident, because he can play anything. With any technique. We've seen him play press. We've seen him play off, inside, outside. Find yourself a boundary corner that can also play the slot and handle 2-way goes from 7 yards off. Like, I don't think people realize how rare that is.
Yeah, and he does all of it well. We talk about where we'd put him sort of ideally. Oh, he'd be an elite, like all-pro safety. He'd be this, he'd be that. He could do all that stuff at a really high level. It's not like some players can play multiple roles, but it's like, yeah, he can get by at, you know, that's not Witherspoon. He can excel different coverages, different alignments, going forward, going backward, being physical against the run, all that stuff. And you're getting that. It feels, again, one word safe, especially not in the draft, safer than a lot of other picks.
And I think what the Raiders need more than anything right now is just a hit.
Yeah.
Just hit.
Yeah.
Because their drafts recently have been not ideal.
Yeah, they need hits. Let's just put it in multiple. They need hits.
Now, that brings up a situation where Jalen Carter is on the board at 8. And this is a relatively open secret at this point, so I feel comfortable talking about it. The Steelers are going to come up for a tackle. We don't entirely know which team it's going to be, but we can feel reasonably confident that it's going to be in the top 10 because they know at 17 they ain't getting one. At least probably not the one they want.
Not the one they want, for sure.
And so they have been aggressively calling teams in the top 10 for a long time now. And again, there are many reports out there about that. So this is, I'm not like spilling the beans on anything, but it's true. The Steelers are going up for a tackle. The only thing we don't know is the exact spot they're trading to. With Jalen Carter on the board, I think the reasonable expectation that the Steelers would have was that they can't trade to 9 because the Bears would want Carter. And so they have to go to 8. And we know they've already talked to the Falcons extensively. And we know the Falcons want to get out of that pick because the Falcons want more assets. And they want to build the roster and see what they can do with Desmond Ridder. Makes sense, by the way. Makes total sense. So I think under this scenario, if Carter's there at 8, the Steelers are immediately calling the Falcons, not trying to get Carter, but instead trying to get Paris Johnson Jr., offensive tackle from Ohio State. They are going to do everything they can to protect Kenny Pickett because they desperately need it. And Kenny Pickett does have potential, but that potential will be ruined if he's on the ground. They have more weapons than they could shake a stick at, but they need protection desperately. And I think they're willing to pay whatever price they need to go get that. And it's going to be a significant price going from 17 up to 8. Now, not as much as the Vikings going up to 3, but it's going to be a significant price. And I think that price is still a small one to pay to make sure that you're getting the best possible evaluation of a young quarterback by giving him a chance to actually throw the ball.
This one feels necessary and likely. We know that communication has occurred. On one of our live streams on Bootleg a couple of weeks ago on our just regular sort of draft Q&A, said that I knew, which I did. Next time I'll say I think, that the Steelers had called the Bears about the pick to inquire and say, what would it cost? I didn't think this was news because it's just due diligence. It's what GMs do. They call in a range and say, hey, come 2 weeks from now at the draft. If we wanted to move up and we don't want to have to do it in 3 minutes when you're on the clock, what would be the rough parameters?
I think you were the first one to let it slip, and we were kind of like, oh shit, I don't know if we should have said that. And then like 3 days later, it was like all over the place.
The next day. Yeah. And it went everywhere. And I was like, I didn't think this was a thing. Like, and what was funny about that is at that time, people that do know reached out and said, well, A, you're right. And B, they've also talked to the Falcons. And I'm like, I know, that's what I said. You're going to talk to a range of teams. You're going to look at 7. You're going to look at 8. You're going to look at 9. You're going to look at 10. You're going to call all those teams and go, okay, well, they're pretty locked in here. They don't want to move here. It's going to be really expensive. They're open here. Like, this is possible if the board falls this way. That's just what GMs do leading up to the draft. So I didn't think it was news. Turned out to be news. I think Pittsburgh's going to be aggressive here because they want to get the one they want. Mm-hmm. They know at 17 that they might get one of the 4th, 5th, maybe 6th best tackles at that point.
Maybe.
But because everybody knows Pittsburgh needs a tackle, if they wait to 17, they can get jumped by teams in the 20s who go, look, if we get to Pittsburgh, they're definitely taking a tackle. So we're going to go up and try and get the 5th best one. Pittsburgh in turn is saying, we're not going to wait for that to happen. Everybody knows we want tackle. We're going to go to the first place we can reasonably afford to get the tackle we choose. We're pretty sure we don't have to worry about 9. We think we know what that pick is, but anytime like just before that, or especially right after that, the bidding price is going to go up. The control is going to go down. This feels like what could happen to me.
Because they got ahead. And again, just in terms of the tackle run we expect, the Titans could take one. The Packers could take one. The Patriots could take one. Like the Jets definitely could take one. That's 4 before we even get to 17.
Oh.
So they got to go. They got to go. They don't really have a choice. They don't. And, talking specifically about Paris Johnson, in terms of athletic profile and length and versatility, again, he's played on both sides of the line.
Mm-hmm.
He's played guard and tackle.
Yep.
So you can just figure it out. Like, where's his best spot? I think it would be left tackle for them. But, like, if they just need to get their best 5 on the field, similar to how Dallas with Tyler Smith, it's like, I thought he was a tackle, but he could also play guard. Tyler Smith ended up playing both.
Yeah.
And I think that Paris Johnson has the flexibility where you can move him around if you need to. They probably won't have to, but if they need to, they can. The best zone blocker at tackle in this class, and I don't think it's particularly close. His movement ability in space is special. His ability to, talking about fronts and how teams play against like weak side outside zone, when they line up as like a ghost 9 over a tackle, it's 9 times out of 10, more than that, 9.5 times out of 10, that thing's cutting back because you can't get outside that ghost 9.
Yeah.
Paris Johnson can do it. Like, he's got the feet to do it, where he can all of a sudden just be on you in a jump, and he's in your chest and he's cranking you around, and all of a sudden an edge that's not supposed to be there is there. So from that standpoint, this is also a Najee Harris booster, in addition to a Kenny Pickett booster. In pass protection, there are some things he can clean up. I'm not saying he's perfect, but the floor is really solid, and it's way better than what they had last year, which I think is key for them.
Paris Johnson Jr., elite tackle traits, extremely long arms. We talk about arm length a lot. It is not the only thing, but it is an important piece of the mix. With him, his movement skills are tremendous. His frame is big in general. He's 6'5", 6'6", like big dude, long arms. Very good run blocker right now for lots of the reasons you mentioned, and some others too. One of the best run blocking tackles in this class. I wouldn't say the best, but depends on who you think's a tackle and who you think's a guard. Pass blocking, not as good as people think with those tools, but the tools are there.
Mm-hmm.
Bowen talked about uncoachable traits. He is chock full of uncoachable traits, and you get him with a line coach and you clean up those things. Those are cleanable, uppable things for pass protection. But you start with a high level base floor run blocker. Najee Harris just applauds this pick from the peanut gallery. Kenny Pickett is super happy that he's got a cornerstone that is going to start at a decent level. I think the other thing about Johnson is the losses in pass protection are like, I want to say kind of predictable.
Yeah.
They're not like, oh my God, I'm going to get killed. And quarterbacks, if they know, hey, if he loses, he's going to lose on the inside hand, like they can be ready for that. Pickett's very mobile, right? So it's not going to be a death sentence starting off. It's not a fatal flaw where Paris Johnson Jr. is going to be a bust, because there are going to be some losses, some things to clean up, some things he watches on film on Monday and they go, don't do that again. And he's going to be able to fix it because he's got the physical tools. So I think Pittsburgh, again, very open secret they want to tackle, very open secret that they're willing to move up to do it. They're going to pick the spot that allows them to get one of the top 2 so that they get their choice, put the cornerstone in place, and can kind of just work the offense around that as he grows.
Now that gets us to 9 with the Bears.
Top Bears.
And in terms of chalk picks, this is about as chalky as we're going to get for the rest of the draft. We're going with Jalen Carter. I don't think that Jalen Carter falls out of the top 10, and I don't think he falls out of the top 9. And this is somewhat of a risk. It's not a risk on the field.
Sure.
Off the field, there are concerns, and there are teams that are completely out.
Yep.
Whether or not that's fair, not my position to say.
It's a fact,
but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Because he's a better player than, in terms of just better pure football player, he's a better player than everybody's going ahead of him. But there's a reason why he's going at 9. And I think the reason why the Bears would be willing to take on this risk that other franchises ahead of them are not is because they have so much capital at this point that I don't think they care. They can afford, I'm not saying this will miss, But if something goes wrong, they can afford it because they have all these extra first round picks they got from Carolina. I think that they could still, not having 32 hurts, but they could still get pretty significant assets on day 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried. Like, they don't have to absolutely 100% nail this pick. This is not a Raiders situation where it's like, dear God, we need a hit. They can afford to take this risk. And the upside is worth it because Jalen Carter is the best player in this class. He is I don't even know if the term generational is right here because Quinnen Williams is still on his rookie deal, but he's the best D tackle prospect since Quinnen Williams, who was the best D tackle prospect since Aaron Donald. That's a tier of 3 guys in the last 10 years, and he's in it. And he's arguably more talented than Quinnen Williams. So the upside is absolutely insane. He has all-pro potential, like annual all-pro potential. You just need to make sure that the locker room leadership and the support system is there to get the best out of him.
Mm-hmm.
That is literally the only concern. And there's been a lot of comparisons made to Warren Sapp, which I understand. Again, full disclosure, I used to work with Warren Sapp.
Yeah,
I have intimate knowledge of Warren Sapp.
Mm-hmm. You want to rephrase that?
Pause. No, but like I was around Warren.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that. It's different. I don't think Jalen Carter's a bad person. But there are teams that are just out for various reasons. And I think that he's gonna slip to 9. And I think that could potentially be maybe a wake-up call for him. Who knows? I think it would be, in a way, good for him to slide a little bit to learn because he's young. He's a kid. I get it. But again, the Bears need to have the leadership structure in place to make this work. They need to do right by him, just like the Bucs did right by Warren. And it worked out with Warren.
Yep.
Warren fell also. Warren did not go as high as he should have in his draft.
Mm-hmm.
But there was leadership, there was support structure, and Warren became a Hall of Famer. So that's kind of my piece on the Jalen Carter thing. There's a reason he's fallen.
Sure. And
it's a good reason. But I don't think he falls past 9.
I believe the Bears will end Jalen Carter's slide if he's there at 9. I'm pretty sure that will happen. They've done extensive work on him. They've sat with him now multiple times. They understand. And the other piece of this, we talk a lot about all the pieces you talked about, is remember the first move that Poles and Eberflus made when they took power.
Gutted the roster.
They had to do that. Yeah. But in terms of additions, when they cleared the decks and they said, okay, this is going to be our first swing, which is a very important move for a new GM. First draft pick's very important, and first free agency move, first big free agency move. What was the swing? And even if you don't remember the player,
I can't remember.
What was the position?
The first move they made?
Very first big.
I can't remember chronologically.
3-tech. Larry Ogunjobi.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but it didn't work out because the medical.
Because of the failed physical. He ends up in Pittsburgh. But literally, they were going to pay him $10 million a season to come in and play 3-tech because they prioritize that position in this defense. This is, again, the Colts defense, if you're thinking of it that way, that Eberflus brought with him. Alan Williams, defensive coordinator. This is a pivotal piece this is a straw that stirs the drink for the defense. They need a penetrating 3-tech. They tried to get Larry Ogunjobi. It didn't work out. They pivoted to plan B. They made it through last season with that plan. They haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
They need this role. Arguably the best player on film, on tape, in the entire draft is there at 9. You've done extensive work. You've sat with him. You, by all reports, are comfortable with what you're getting, good and bad. They still want a game-wrecking 3. And there is not a better player in this draft, or probably drafts on either side, than Jalen Carter. Everybody's been waiting for Jalen Carter to come out for 2 or 3 years, even with the loaded, 9 players off Georgia's defense got drafted last year, and everybody was still like, yeah, but 88 is the best. So this lines up value need. They're willing to take the risk because it's very important to their defense, and they're comfortable with the kid. I just think it's going to happen. It's not necessarily what I would do. I'm not upset as a Bears fan if they're comfortable. They have that knowledge. They've sat with him. As far as what Jalen Carter can do for the Bears defense, it's a home run.
Now, at 10, again, another shakeup. And again, continuing the theme of tackles going early, I have a team who just recently trading again. I have the Jets taking that shiny new 15 pick after getting Aaron Rodgers and trading up with the Eagles, who need more assets. They do not have a lot of picks in this draft.
5, right?
I think it's 5 total.
That was one thing we didn't mention about the Bears. 8 in the top 150.
Yeah, they got plenty of assets.
A lot of picks.
The Eagles don't.
Nope.
They need to get
5
picks. Now, I could see a wild Bijan Robinson pick here. Would totally understand it. But I think Howie realizes that assets might be more important right now because they need to keep replenishing the depth to maximize the Hurts window when they're paying them a bunch of money. Like they got to get some more rookie contracts on this roster. So I have the Eagles trading down with the Jets, and the Jets getting a new left tackle in Peter Skoronski, who can also play guard, just like AVT.
Yep.
Guard, tackle, flexibility. I know some people think that he can't play tackle. I think he can. Just like Slater out of the same program. You know, people talk about arm length and all that kind of stuff. Slater's fine. If you're physically talented enough and you're a badass and you have, great technique, you can play tackle with shorter arms. You're going to be fine. But Peter Skoronski, specifically for the Jets, I still don't think they're all the way in on Mekhi Becton.
No.
And they've been sending signals that they don't fully believe in Mekhi Becton for years at this point. And I know Mekhi's in shape. He's in great shape right now. He's working out. He's excited. He wants to play with A-Rod, everything like that. I would like to hedge. And I think if they stick at 15, they're not going to get the options they want at tackle to hedge. And again, with Skoronski, the fact that he can play legitimately all 5 spots means that if Mekhi works out at tackle, fine.
Great.
We got depth, and we got a guy who can play swing everything. So I think, again, the Jets the roster is in a spot where they can afford to give up more assets, which they just gave up assets for A-Rod, but they can afford to give up more because the roster's already great in order to fill quite possibly the last hole they have on offense, which is tackle and or tackle depth, however you want to phrase it. But Peter Skoronski is a tremendous player, great technician, way better athlete than he's given credit for. The arm length doesn't really concern me. I would at least let him play tackle, and if we need to move him to guard, we will, but I don't think we'll have to. And if we need to put him on the right side, fine. I don't think we'll have to, but I think that this organization, in terms of capitalizing on this Rodgers window, I would not want all of that to rest on, is Mekhi Becton staying healthy? I would like to have insurance. And I think giving up whatever minor assets we need to go from 15 to 10 is worth that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Peter Skoronski is the Bryce Young of the offensive line in this particular draft, right? I talked about Bryce and I said, he's great quarterback. He does all the great quarterbacking things, but he's short. Skoronski, he's a great offensive lineman. He does all the great offensive line things, but his arms aren't quite long enough. And he was in an interview yesterday with Brian Baldinger on NFL, and Brian said, did you know this was a thing? And he said, I actually didn't until I started this whole process. I didn't realize that my arms being like a half an inch shorter than people wanted them to be was a big deal. And you can tell that he didn't know it was a big deal on tape because he stoned tons of pass rushers.
Van Ness got him like once or twice, but again, it's Lucas Van Ness.
Yeah,
so it's
here's the thing about
course.
That. So he had 400. This is Skoronski, 474 pass block snaps this year.
Yeah.
He gave up 6 pressures.
And I think 2 of them were to another guy who's going in the top 15.
Total.
I know. He was rock solid.
1 sack, 6 total pressures in 474 pass blocking snaps. And he's a good run blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would say arguably a better run blocker than Paris Johnson Jr.
It depends.
Depends on the style.
On outside zone, Paris. In terms of like inside zone or pulling, well, pulling I'd still probably get Paris. But like inside zone, like generating vertical displacement and all that kind of stuff, winning on
the fact that we're even having this conversation about, well, maybe
it's very close.
It's very like
it's
if
very
you're
close.
as good as one of the guys we just pegged as a top run blocker in this class, and you gave up 6 pressures on 474 snaps, guess what, folks? You can play tackle. You just did play tackle at an extremely high level over, a multitude of various fronts and personnel and everything else. Kept your quarterback as clean as is possible. Peter Skoronski is a tackle. He will go to the league. He will probably play tackle. If he doesn't, he can slot in as a high level guard. That's fine. But I think he will be just like his teammate Rashawn Slater. He is not as powerful as Slater, but he is easily as technically refined as Slater was, and will be plenty effective. We had this exact same discussion about Slater 2 years later. Nobody's talking about that. Slater is a tackle for the Chargers and a damn good one. Like Skoronski, I feel like has a very similar potential to do the same thing.
The one thing with like this is my last note on Skoronski. When you play in the Big Ten, you're playing against Ohio State edges, Michigan edges, Penn State edges, Iowa edges,
Illinois edges who are coming.
Like the SEC schedule and the Big Ten schedule, in terms, like if you're an offensive tackle that is to survive a gauntlet, they're the same in terms of overall talent.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's insane. So yeah, he's a tackle who can also play guard. Now that gets us to the Titans at 11. Could also be a candidate for tackle here.
I think we can just say that. We could just give the caveat that from now on, all these teams are
basically
tackle contenders. And that's why we think the tackle run is going to occur, is because you cannot throw a dart in the rest of the first round and not hit 2 teams with 1 dart that need a tackle.
However, I'm going to deviate slightly, because I think there's 2 things that you can get to help a young quarterback, whether it's Malik Willis, who's eventually getting snaps, or if we're riding with the Ryan Tannehill thing, which it sounds like they are. Like, I don't think it's a competition for the starting spot, but again, Ryan Tannehill's older now. Durability has not been his strong suit as of recently. Like, I think that eventually Malik Willis is going to get some snaps again this year. And I don't think they're taking quarterback. I don't think they're taking Levis. So we need to either help Tannehill or help Malik be the best version of themselves. And there's 2 ways to do that. You can either upgrade from Andre Dillard at left tackle, or you can create the most imposing stable of weapons that Tennessee has seen in quite some time. They already have Treylon Burks, who had himself a nice rookie year.
Very much so.
Kyle Phillips, who we are big believers in the slot, if he could stay healthy, which has always been kind of his knock. Nick Westbrook-Ikini, solid number 2/number 3, some people consider. I still want to add one more, because if they
on top of Chig, because
on top of Chig, on top of King Henry's still there. A lot of people were fans of Hassan Haskins as like a number 2 running back. Trayvon Wesco weirdly has his fans, but they've got dudes.
Yep.
I want to add one more to it, just to make sure that if somebody gets hurt, we're insulated, and so that the quarterbacks have as many weapons as possible to throw to. And so our first receiver is coming off the board, and it's Zay Flowers from Boston College. Now, in terms of who I expect this pick to be, I expect it to be JSN. But if it was me, again, we're kind of doing a hybrid predictive / what I would do mock. This is one of the ones where I'm taking control of the wheel and I'm saying this is what I would do. I would go Zay Flowers. I think he's a more versatile receiver than JSN, in the sense that I think that stretching the field vertically is an X. He can do that. He can do all the slot stuff. He's got yak ability. We saw him up close at Shrine Bowl. He's phenomenal in interviews. There's nothing he can't do. And I think JSN is amazing, and he's going to go right around here as well. But again, if I had to bet my job on it, I would take Zay Flowers.
I don't dislike the pick because we talk about building out rooms and position groups, right? Because you have Treylon Burks, who brings different skills. Because you have Kyle Phillips, comes back healthy, who brings different skills. Zay fits very nicely, I think, between them. And honestly, if you're looking at the sort of envelope of his skills, it overlaps both of those guys on either end. He's a great sort of connector for their receiving room. It would give them a very potent offense.
There's a lot of people very upset in chat right now because everybody wants Zay, but
it is a skill that you have, upsetting people with your mock draft.
Especially Patriots fans who I feel like have already bought Zay Flowers jerseys at this point. They all expect him to be a Patriot. I expect him to be a Patriot.
I was going to say, I think we'll be a little surprised on the live stream if Zay does not end up in New England one way or another. There are just links that get established to a player. And this happened early. This was already like established when we were at the Shrine Bowl. Like the Patriots media contingent, which is the independent media contingent. Obviously, the Patriots coaches were there. They were one of the 2 coaching staffs for Shrine Bowl. Like it was just Patriots everywhere. Patriots affiliated folk everywhere. And they were all there for Zay. Like they weren't there for the tackles or the linebackers or the corners. There's a lot of really good players that they were there for Zay. And we just kind of came out of that game going, man, like, did you see that? Like it was just feeding frenzy, New England, Zay Flowers. And from then on, it's just sort of built steam. So I think we'll be a little bit surprised if he doesn't end up as a Patriot.
I mean, he went to have a meeting with O'Brien in New England like 3 weeks ago, and they were doing offensive install. Like it's the worst kept secret in football. Yeah. The Patriots love Zay Flowers, but they're not getting them, at least not in this mock. And that brings us to the Texans at 12. And I'm not going to waste any time on it. They still need receiver. I'm not taking Will Levis. I'm not doing it. I understand in this scenario, the Texans probably would take Will Levis. I'm not doing it. I can't condone it. Again, I'm taking the wheel. I'm doing a what I would do pick here, and I'm doing JSN because they still need receiving help, and I would rather take my shot with DTR, take my shot with Aiden O'Connell, maybe Hendon Hooker's there in the second round. Take my shot with those guys, but give them resources around them. And JSN is an incredibly safe receiver prospect. He's an absolute demon in the slot. Yak ability is awesome. Catches everything. Hands are vice grips. I think, early in the process, I was like, he reminds me a lot of Jarvis Landry because the long speed is limited. But the short acceleration, when I went back and watched him a second time because you were pounding the table, it's like, he's not Jarvis Landry. He's better. The short area acceleration, I was like, okay, that looks a little bit more like Cooper Kupp. Now, Cooper has better long speed, yes. And so I think he's somewhere in between Jarvis Landry and Cooper Kupp, which means if you're getting somewhere in between the guy who set the record for the most receptions over the first 5 seasons and a guy who won like Offensive Player of the Year and had one of the greatest receiving seasons in history, if you're in between that, you're pretty fucking good. So JSN, come on down. You're a Houston Texan. We'll figure out quarterback later. Yeah. But they need to have a structure around him.
Nice neighborhood to end up in. But you talked about at the top with the Anderson pick of building the house, right? Building the structure and then inserting the quarterback later. This is another step, and it's a very nice step. Dameon Pierce, one of my favorite players from last year's draft as a running back. You've already got pieces in place on offensive line. Not all the pieces, but some pieces in place on offensive line. You now add arguably what I think is the top receiver in this draft. And you are building a foundation to be able to plug in somebody with skills. Now, whether it's a quarterback later this year or whether it's from another source, I'll ask you to put your Texans GM hat on since you have your beautiful Texans sweatshirt on. Would you, at this point, if you go ahead and pick JSN, give John Lynch a call and say, what do you want for Trey Lance?
100%.
And
100%.
That would make it very interesting. If the Texans come out of this draft with Trey at quarterback, JSN at receiver, Damian Pierce from last year's class, which we loved, was one of our 3 best classes. You're starting to look at a nucleus of very young, very talented players that can start to push in a division that has not, the heavyweights have faltered a little bit in that division. It's there for the taking. If you come out of this draft with that sort of 3-headed monster, we talk about used to be triplets, right? It was Cowboys right across the state. You need a quarterback, you need a running back, you need a wide receiver. I think that's shifted a little bit. You kind of need quarterback, 2 wide receivers, and a pretty good running back
who
now.
can catch the ball.
Yeah. It's shifted a little bit, but you're starting to build that nucleus of offensive talent that really starts to say, if I'm another team in that division, I'm starting to look at the Texans and going, oh, damn. I was kind of hoping I could write them off twice a year. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. If you come out of the first 2 picks with Anderson and JSN, like you did good.
Also, by the way, when it comes to potentially going after Trey Lance, which again, the 49ers wouldn't give him up for nothing.
No,
it would be
absolutely not.
expensive. But he knows the offense because Bobby Slowick came over from San Francisco.
Nobody knows him better.
Nobody knows him better. It wouldn't take long to get him up to speed because he's already at the same terminology, concepts, coaching staff knows
transition
him.
Would be the smallest bump possible with Slowick running the offense. And that has got to be exciting to the Texans' power structure. It also gives them, we talk about athletic potential as a quarterback gets his feet underneath him quite literally in the passing game. What can he do, athletically in the run game to support that? We see that being a key point of young quarterback development, and Lance obviously has that.
Now, getting to the Packers at 13, who just got up to 13 with a pick swap in the Aaron Rodgers trade. Small aside, because we didn't talk about it when we talked about the Jets. I felt like both teams came out okay in the Rodgers trade because the Jets, again, they already have the roster, 95% of the roster done. They just needed a quarterback to get them there. They're going on a 2-year run. They don't care about a second-round pick or that can become a conditional first. They don't care. They just had like 3 first-round picks a year ago. Yeah. They've had a lot of extra first-round picks. They've already accumulated those assets and got those players. They need a freaking quarterback. They missed on Zach Wilson. They didn't want to wait around. So it's like, let's go get a guy. F them picks. Let's do what the Rams did and go get a guy and make a run with a roster. And so I think the Jets came out just fine. And you know what? I think the Packers came out just fine too. They cleared a bunch of cap space. They got assets. They have to rebuild the roster. Like their roster was not in the same shape the Jets was because they need to give Jordan Love some assets around him so that they can get a proper evaluation. I thought both teams came out just fine.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks panned the Jets and said, look, if Rodgers doesn't play at a high level, this is a disastrous trade for New York. Well, yeah.
But if they didn't get Rodgers and they were stuck with Wilson, it would have been a disaster anyway.
But that's the point. Like, that's why you take a swing. And if you're going to take a swing with a Hall of Fame quarterback. Very comfortable saying that Rodgers will easily go into the Hall of Fame. One of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the position throughout the history of the league. Has some of the best seasons by a quarterback ever. Is he at that level? No. Has he fallen off a lot? No. He can still make all those throws. He goes into a loaded situation. Talk about building the house. Joe Douglas has already built the house. The house is there. This is the piece. So they're willing to spend those picks. And somebody's like, well, if he doesn't play 2 years for him, and look, if he doesn't play 2 years and he retires mid-season, it was a mess anyways.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams just did the same thing with Stafford. I think they won the Super Bowl in the first year he got there.
No. So this is a swing. They took a swing. And Green Bay, I think unloading the financial asset is probably the biggest pieces. They don't have to pay the $60 million. And they will end up paying some of it. The finalization of that contract is going to come out later. It's going to be a Friday news dump when they finally dump all the numbers about, what was palatable and what was not. I'm sure Green Bay will eat a little bit of it, but they're not eating $60 million. And they get some picks to build up around Jordan Love and rebuild their own house. So, yeah, I think both teams did what they wanted to do. I think there are people that are going to poke holes in whether or not they think what those teams wanted to do was right or good.
Now, when it comes to how I see the Packers using that 13th pick, again, sticking with the theme of tackle, David Bakhtiari, I don't want to say there's problems between him and the organization, but even he himself has expressed there's been some awkwardness.
Sure.
Based on some comments that he made, I think on Bussin' with the Boys, Taylor Lewan's podcast. And he's an older guy. He's 32 now. I think he's going to be 33 this season. Yep. Durability has been a concern. And after 2023, if I recall correctly, it's like a $21.5 million cap savings if he's cut. Is no benefit to cutting him now, but cutting him in March saves them a lot of money. Yeah. And so I think with Zach Tom, who I love, I had Zach Tom as a first rounder last year, went in the 4th round, played like a first rounder. So, we won a little bit there, but I still think they need another tackle for the future, or else they could potentially end up in a situation where we have Jordan Love going into his maybe last year on that deal in terms of getting evaluation with no left tackle. So I'm going to go with the Packers, continuing that tackle run. Broderick Jones, OT from Georgia. We can still get receivers in the 2nd round. With the 2 top guys off the board, like if JSN was there, I would have taken JSN. If Flowers was there, I would have taken Flowers. They're not.
I'm not sad about that.
I'm sure you're not.
Yeah.
As a Bears fan, because you don't want JSN
or Flowers
just killing you for the next 10 years.
Do not.
But you can still get Tillman or Perry or Hyatt or whoever in round 2.
Sure.
Maybe even Quentin Johnson in round 2, depending on where he goes. So I'm not worried about getting receiver later. I am worried about getting tackle, which is the general theme and why we believe there could be upwards of 6 or 7 tackles going in the 1st round. Broderick Jones is one of the most naturally gifted tackles in this class. He's an ultra smooth mover. I think he's smoother than Paris Johnson, even though I don't think he has the same play strength, but I think he's smoother. I think he reminds me a lot of a young Teron Armstead when he came out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and he only went in the 3rd round because he went to Arkansas Pine Bluff. But, in terms of movement skills, very similar. Yeah. Teron had to develop play strength, which he did, and so he became one of the best left tackles in football because of that. Broderick Jones, I think, similar story. But as a young, likely swing tackle for them that could then start in 2024, I think the upside here is phenomenal. And in the absence of getting a receiver, I would rather give myself a backup plan already on the roster when we assume they're going to cut Bakhtiari next year. And he's about as high upside as it gets in this class. So I'm all in on Broderick Jones here. They're not getting a developmental left tackle in the 2nd round, so you might as well get one now.
Yeah, and that succession plan is really important, especially at that position. Key position to make sure the offense continues to function at a high level. Bakhtiari's struggled pretty badly with injuries over the past couple of years, a lot of missed games. When he's in there, he's great. It's the when he's in there part. And then you put the contract on top of that. It doesn't make any sense to kind of go, oh, we'll get one next year and start and get through all the rookie bumps then. As far as the player himself, Broderick Jones, I'm extremely high on him. Might end up as my tackle too, still between him and other players, but wildly talented, very smooth, not as big, either as long or as tall as Paris Johnson, but uses his size very, very well. He's not small. He's 6'4", 34 and something inch arms, like very good physical profile. But when you watch him on tape at Georgia, can get to either side of the line very, very quickly. When he gets there, he's in the right position, plays, I think, with good leverage, needs to add power, which is different, but his leverage is good. His angles are good. His bend as a tackle, the way he sits and anchors against power, all very, very cool to watch if you're into offensive line play. So in terms of getting a good player, and we know they're already familiar with the Georgia program. They drafted high from Georgia last year. They love
Bulldogs.
They love their Bulldogs. So this seems to be a lineup fit in several ways. I think he would be a very good player for the Packers. As much as it pains me, I can still appreciate the Packers do this every year. They pick players I really like, at least 2. You know this. There are a couple of players every year I'm like, can't fault him. Loved him. Happens to wear green and gold now, but love the player. Broderick Jones would be one of those guys right away.
Now, Patriots at pick 14, again, in the absence of Zay Flowers. And in the absence of JSN, I was like, okay, how do we help Mac Jones? And I, again, are a prime candidate to go tackle early. Looking at their roster, they do have Trent Brown there, but I'm not totally convinced he even makes the roster this year. They did bring in Riley Reif on a 1-year deal. They brought in Calvin Anderson as a swing tackle on a 2-year deal, but they're both low money. They don't have a lot of money invested at tackle. And I think it's because they feel like they could get one at 14 if they had to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they're not going to go much further than this. But in the absence of Zay, I think that investing at left tackle is a prudent move because, again, the Trent Brown situation, I get the sense that he's not on the team in September. And so I'm going to go with Anton Harrison here out of Oklahoma. And I really struggled with, did I want Anton to go at 13 to the Packers and with Broderick? Like it's right there. It's neck and neck. They're both right there. I ended up with going Broderick, considering his upside as a mover and an athlete. But Anton he's just so damn technically proficient and powerful. And it's not as pretty as Broderick Jones. His first step is not as explosive. His kick set, honestly, I would call it ugly. It really is. But he uses his length so well. And his hands, he might have the second best hands behind Skoronski in this tackle class in pass protection. And you watch him specifically in the Kansas State game against Felix and Adike Ozoma.
Yep.
Holy shit. Mm-hmm. He dominated it. Like Felix got him one time on an inside counter out of, like, in terms of 5 and 7. I watched every single rep on a 5 and 7 step drop pass, bro. I was like, let me just speed run this game again to refresh it. And I did that last night at like 2:30 a.m. Yeah. And it was just win after win after win. Slow it down frame by frame and watch how, Felix would get into his wrist and he just boom, reset over and over and over again. And he would flash into the hands. He's used these big old mitts and like super long. What's his arm length again?
Harrison is just over 34.
Yeah. He's got long, literally take it and flash it into Felix's face mask to blind him a little bit and get Felix to react. And then he's coming up and under and refitting. Like his hands are so good. And even though his feet are kind of messy, and he plays high, like his anchor is weirdly good for how high he plays.
Yeah.
But he's just so technically sound. And I think he feels like a Patriots tackle because a lot of their guys traditionally, it has not looked pretty, but they're really effective.
Yep.
And he feels like a Patriot to me.
I love Anton Harrison. It's one of the guys in this class that the more I went back to his tape, the more I was like, do I like him that much? Do I? I do.
Yeah. I
like him that much.
Yeah.
And he kept moving up and up in the rankings and, ended up really high for me. But physically, you're talking about 6'4", 315. If you're talking about Jones, he's 6'5", 311. Very, very similar. Both with 34-inch arms. Jones a little bit longer. Really experienced run blocker, Anton Harrison. Second most run block snaps in this class after one Broderick Jones. So
they weren't as good.
No.
But a lot of them.
Yeah, he has multiple reps there. It didn't turn out as well. It's certainly the piece of his game that is less well developed. You are getting a pass protector. Everything you talked about with Felix was not run blocks. It was all pass blocks, right?
Yeah.
And he's incredibly proficient about holding folks off. And that is when you're talking about having a young quarterback in Green Bay, right? Or a young quarterback still in New England. That's an attractive thing. Like, let's not get him killed on the pass. We can scheme up other ways to get runs. And that's where Harrison will have to develop his game. But I am extremely high on him. He is just out of the top tier of tackles for me. And I mean, like, first in the next tier, and was teetering throughout my process. And I'm still not sure that he won't sneak in there. I really think, again, because of the struggles in the run game, and he hasn't gotten that yet. Again, not that he won't, not that he can't. He just hasn't gotten that yet. He is going to fall just outside that sort of top tier of tackles. but he's right there. I like him a lot.
Now that brings us to the Eagles at 15. Remember, they traded the Jets traded up to 10 to get Skoronski. Eagles traded back to 15. So they're on the clock. And they don't need a lot. It's mostly like depth players and insulating themselves from injury and everything like that. Just maintaining the depth.
Succession
planning, for aging stars, whether it's Lane or Jason or specifically for this pick, Brandon Graham. And they have edge speed with Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. What I really wanted to give them a future option for is the Brandon Graham role. And people look at Graham's size, it's like 6'1", 265, and they're like, how is he playing 5 technique? But he does, and he does it super well. He lines up inside at 3 technique. He plays 5. He lines up wide. So I wanted somebody who had that type of Brandon Graham flexibility, obviously in a very different frame, but somebody who could do that role. Mm-hmm. Where if we want to put Reddick next to a 5 technique, who can also rush the passer, who can do that isn't Brandon Graham. Mm-hmm. And I came up with Lucas Van Ness from Iowa, somebody who, again, can play 3 technique, 5 technique. You want to go into 4-down look and put him at 6 technique and just murder tight ends. He can do that. You want to give him a long runway as a 9 against a tackle. Again, we saw it against Skoronski. Speed to power. It's almost unblockable. Yeah. He's still a puppy, redshirt sophomore, even a rotational player in his own defensive line at Iowa, but the talent is off the charts. Incredible power. And considering that you can line him up in a whole bunch of different places and he can learn under Brandon Graham until Graham rides off into the sunset, this is an investment in the future that I think, Howie, who loves his trench players, this is an investment in the future I think Howie would really love. And I think Eagles fans eventually would love him too.
Van Ness, it all starts with power because there's so much of it. Like, that is the calling card. But when you think of a power defensive end, you tend to think of big guys that can stand people up and turn them. Van Ness adds crazy amount of straight line speed. He isn't the most agile. He's not, unable to change directions, but it is about this massive amount of power. He has really long arms in terms of his frame. He's still growing into a very young player. But he adds this speed element that when you put him on the outside and he's bringing this bulldozer-like power at the speed of a bullet train, it is very difficult to deal with. It is mainly his trick. I don't want to say he's a one-trick pony, but he's like a 1.5
hell of a trick
pony.
Though.
Yeah, but the trick is, whoa, look at that. And you see it over and over again. He will develop the rest of it. He feels to me like a long-lost Watt brother, like the forgotten Watt brother, right? Who is not as developed as either of them coming out. And people forget that JJ was not as developed, but had massive power and a big frame. Van Ness, not as much power and not as big a frame, right? He's not the top Watt brother, but he plays like that. And you've seen what those guys have done in the league. TJ's had, arguably a couple of the best seasons out of any of the edge rushers drafted since he's come into the league. Feels like Van Ness could get there, right? And in the meantime, you can move him around and he can wreck stuff. When you move him into 3 and he's just bench pressing guards, you're like, all right, that works. You move him out to 6 and say, all right, use your speed. And if they get near you, just go piston arm and, get to the quarterback in a straight line, because it's pretty much what he does, but he gets it done. He would fit right in Philadelphia because they do have a Reddick outside, right? And again, Eagles don't need anything. So it feels a little bit like a luxury pick that can develop, that can be both. We have a role for him now and some succession planning kind of fused together. Feels very much like a Howie move.
What they need is youth. That's what they need. And this provides that. Now, 16, staying in the NFC East with the Commanders. Commanders, I think, have an underrated roster.
Yep.
And I think maybe they don't get enough credit for the threat they are in the NFC to at least make the playoffs. I don't think they're as good as Philly or as a fully armed and operational Niners team, which we rarely ever get to see. But even Seattle, I'd say it's kind of iffy. Like, would I take Seattle or Commanders? I'd probably take Seattle. But the Commanders do legitimately have a better roster than they're given credit for, and they don't have that many really overwhelming needs. That being said, I think corner is something that they could stand to improve. And my last tier 1 corner is still available. That's going to be Deonte Banks, hometown-ish kid. Grew up in Baltimore, went to Maryland. And I mean, everything's within spitting distance over there. So it's he could probably commute from his childhood home if he really wanted to.
He could.
Uber talented. And I there's a lot of corners in this class where I'm like, okay, I'd play him in press. Don't really trust it in off. I love him in zone. Man's kind of iffy. I love him in man. Not great instincts in zone. Deonte Banks is one of the only guys in this class where I'm like, doesn't really matter. He's fine. Yeah. Put him out there. Press, off, zone, man. He can do anything and everything. His feet in transitions are super quick, very explosive out of his breaks. Aggressive in press man coverage. Emphasis on the aggression. Yeah. Sometimes a little bit too aggressive. It's probably going to get several flags next season, but it's not that he's aggressive because he can't run with guys. It's aggressive because he just really wants to take your soul in press. And I think that he shares that quality with Joey Porter, but I think he's more versatile than Joey Porter, because Porter, I'm not really somebody I'd leave him in off coverage. Whereas I think Deonte Banks, you could play him off if you really how do I explain this without diagrams? A whiteboard. There are certain trips checks where the outside corner needs to be off versus in a press look. Yeah, because you're running something sneaky.
Sneaky.
And they kind of need that space to go forwards or backwards, right? And I think Deonte can do that type of stuff better than Joey Porter. Whereas Joey Porter, if we're getting a 3-by-1 look, he's just over on the backside. He's beating up the X receiver. Whereas Deonte can do both. And so you can't really hide from him that easily because he can go anywhere and do anything. So Deonte Banks, phenomenal corner prospect. He's probably going to go around here in this round. I don't exactly know where, but somewhere between 15 to 20 is my guess. And he's going to be a day 1 starter.
I think, yes, absolutely. Will be on the field very quickly. We just talked about Anton Harrison being just out of that, or, tickling that top tier or bubble for offensive tackle. Deonte Banks is like that for corner. He's in the top tier for me, but he's right there. He's kind of overshadowed by the Witherspoons and the Gonzalez's, but he shouldn't be. Tons of aggression. Glad you brought that point up because it really stands out on his film. The versatility, I think, is a really key point. I, too, feel very comfortable putting him in any alignment, any technique, and saying he's got the skills and the ability and the demeanor to get that done. You talked about the flags. He has some, more than, some other corners, but not as many as some of the top corners in this. And he will have to tone it down, but he feels like a guy that understands that. And once he sort of feels his way around where the officials are going to let him get away with stuff, it doesn't feel like it's going to be a problem. It's always going to be
it's
there.
More so it's like, buddy, you are 8 yards down the field. Take your hands off his throat, please.
Yeah, like take your boot off his neck. Now, Deonte Banks, a player I really like in this cornerback class. Feel like if you don't get Witherspoon and you do get Banks, not that much of a drop off to me.
No,
like
they're all tier 1.
Similar play style. You're going to get similar results. And Banks is bigger physically. He's 197. He's just about 200 pounds. Whereas Witherspoon's in the 180 range, mid 180 range. Love Banks. Love the hometown aspect of this, that he would get to play really in front of his hometown fans that have seen him grow up through his entire football career. Fun fit.
Now, getting to pick 17. See, what are we, an hour and 44 minutes in? We're only halfway through.
We'll speed up a little.
Getting to pick 17. Falcons back on the board. Remember, they
back on the board.
Big old trade up with the Steelers, who went to 8 to get Paris Johnson Jr. Falcons are at 17. And there's a lot of buzz that the Falcons, if push came to shove, they'd be taking Bijan at 8.
Yeah.
Well, Bijan's still available, and Bijan is going to be a Falcon.
Yeah, this feels right-sized to me in the fact that they slid down the board. The value is now super in line. It was probably pretty good where they were before. They get extra picks. They still get the player they wanted. That would be a home run for the Falcons.
And there's so many takes about never take a running back in the first round. Never do it. Never do it. It's not taking a running back in the first round that's the problem. It's paying them too early.
Sure.
And that's the mistake the Cowboys made with Zeke. Because Zeke was an elite back, right? Yeah. And then they paid him after 3 years. They gave him a ton of guaranteed money. Ended up being a contract that just didn't age well. No. Giants handled Saquon differently. They're basically just going year to year with him. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if Saquon's going to be a Giant next year. We'll see. But the Giants did it the smart way, which is we're going to get them for their entire prime. We got 6 years of contract control. That's the entire prime of a running back. And I think that even if Bijan is only a 6-year player in Atlanta, he would be a phenomenal player in Atlanta. More than just a running back. He's a receiver as well. He is Christian McCaffrey in an even bigger frame. The comparison to LT, as lofty as it is, and as reticent as I am to say it, it's pretty damn close. It's pretty close. He doesn't have LT's long speed, but that's about it. He's got everything else. The jump cut ability, the vision, the power, the tackle breaking ability. He had 104 forced missed tackles last year. Like, we thought that when Javonte came out of North Carolina, that was going to be the most we ever saw. Nope. Bijan blew it out of the water. And he's a great receiver. He's the 3rd or 4th at worst best player in this class. Getting him at 17 is a crazy value. I love Tyler Algier, but he ain't Bijan.
He's not Bijan. I won't talk about Bijan the player. We've already done that. A lot of people have done that. By now, you know who Bijan Robinson is and what he is. 2 things I love about this fit. One, if the Falcons had taken him with their original pick, yes, it would still be a great match. He would automatically be like the 3rd highest paid running back in the league just because of rookie value slots. So they dropped from the top 10 to the second half of the draft. 1 pick into the second half of the draft, but they're in the second half of the draft. So significant savings on the rookie wage scale. So
it's the same guy.
So it's more right size for the same guy. And the other one is, as you were talking about it, I just thought about this in the way that you were describing Bijan's skills, because he does have the highest average depth of target for any of the running backs in this class. And it's way higher. Like, for a running back to have a 2+ yard depth of target is pretty high. His is 6.
Yeah.
So they used him as a wide receiver. They lined him up out wide past the numbers pretty regularly. But there's a veteran in Atlanta that did the reverse of his position switch that would be ideal. And it's Cordell Patterson.
Yeah.
So started as a receiver, didn't really work out to him. Ended up as a special teams demon, and then ended up as a running back, as a fully featured running back. Bijan coming in as a running back who has a lot of receiving chops, gets to sit with Cordell Patterson and learn all those things. I love that particular fit.
Now, getting to pick 18, we got the Lions on the board again. And this one I really, really struggle with, because I know I wanted to hit interior defensive line, because it kind of sounds like, unfortunately, Levi Onwuzurike might not come back. Because we know spinal injuries can be really, really serious.
Yeah.
And head injuries can be really, really serious. So it's unclear if he's ever going to play again, which is unfortunate, because I loved Levi. He was one of my top 2 defensive tackles in that class, and I thought he had a ton of talent. But even if Levi comes back, I still felt like they needed another guy in the interior rotation. And considering the skill set and the power of Aleem McNeil, I kind of just want another one of those, so that nobody can ever run the ball on this team ever again. I'm going to put Mozzie Smith, who's very familiar with the state of Michigan, right next to Aleem McNeil, and basically just make their own version of the Williams Wall in Detroit with all those edge players. They got Hutchinson, they got Pascal, they got Houston, there's like 4 other guys that I can't even remember right now. just improving that defensive line and letting them all hunt together with Mozzie Smith and Aleem next to each other. Mozzie is just a freak athlete, like a freak among freaks. He was tops on Bruce Feldman's freaks list for a reason. I think he could very well be a DJ Reader type player, which means a top 3 to 4 nose tackle in the entire league in short order. And getting him at 18, I think, is absolutely appropriate value.
Yeah, the reason they'd get him at 18 is consistency. It's not what he can do, it's how often he does do it. And Mozzie Smith was one of the players in my first sort of top 125 watch. When I ran through it, I was like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand, because he just disappears for long stretches and then he'll make a play.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, damn. And I thought he was much smaller because of the way he moved.
Mm-hmm.
The combine numbers came out. He was 323. And I was like, what? That's got to be a misprint. Like, that's got to be wrong. There's no way. And so I went back and I watched Mozzie Smith, because I was like, a lot of people are saying Mozzie Smith's a great player. I didn't see it the first time. Went to other games, went a little bit deeper into the film, and you see the explosions. And the first thing is power. His hands are hammers, like sledgehammers. He will rock guards, centers, offensive tackles back on their heels. First punch. And then the movement, short area movement, especially burst at 323. That is just wrong. That's why he was on Feldman's lists. And he can do all that. You see the impact of what he can do when he makes plays like that. And he does make plays, but there are these long stretches where they're going to have to dial it in, right? They're going to have to get that consistency out of him, or rotate him and say, look, you're only going to be in for 3 plays. You need to make a play all 3 plays, and then we're going to pull you out. However they want to do it or manage that in Detroit, they need to do it. But the potential for him to develop, if he develops into somebody like Reader, because the physical's all there.
Yeah.
Once you realize the guy's, whatever he is, 6'2", 323, 6'3", 323, moves like that, has power in his hands like that, you're like, yeah, okay, I'm in. But if they can develop that consistency, Lord help anybody trying to run on Detroit.
Yeah, because him next to McNeil would just be a nightmare.
Not fun.
An absolute nightmare.
Not fun.
All right, getting to 19 now. How about we go tackle again?
Because it's the theme of the day.
It's the theme of the day. Now, what's interesting about the Buccaneers, who I have taken Darnell Wright from Tennessee, a lot of people think Darnell Wright's the best tackle in this class, and I don't blame them for that.
Yeah,
because he pitched shutouts against top tier edges. You know, he shed some weight and looked like a much more explosive mover after shedding that weight. Went to the combine. I mean, you look at him in the drills, it was kind of breathtaking how well he moved. And so, and plus, by the way, great run blocker, all that kind of stuff. So I understand why people have him as OT1. And to be perfectly honest, if he wasn't there at 19, wouldn't be shocked. He happens to be, just based on the way the board fell in this mock draft, he happens to be there at 19. And I think he's a perfect fit for the Bucs, because it is very likely, it's not confirmed, but it's very likely that after the release of Donovan Smith, they're moving Tristan Wirfs to left tackle.
Sure.
So sliding in Darnell Wright, playing his, in my opinion, better position at right tackle across from Tristan, you give them potentially the best tackle duo that franchise has ever had. Even better than they had when they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago, when Donovan was playing better than his normal self, right? Mm-hmm. This would give them that level of tackle play, but consistently year over year, predictably. This is a roster that has unfortunately become rather gutted because of the deal with the devil they made. And so they gotta rebuild the coffers here. They gotta get star players, or at least star talent. And Darnell Wright absolutely is that caliber of talent. He can be a mainstay at right tackle for them, while Tristan holds down the left side. Zero downside to this pick to me.
Yeah, it goes back to the organizational let's build the house thing that you talked about earlier. And this is a more build the house move. All the mock drafts we've seen with the Bucs grabbing Levis or Hooker or whoever at quarterback feels like quarterback first and then we'll surround him, which doesn't, from a money standpoint, doesn't tend to work out as easily because the quarterback's bill comes due before the rest of the roster is ready, typically. If they're able to do this, move Wirfs to left, add Darnell Wright, who I think is the premier pass blocker in this draft based on tape. When you go and see what he did against all the guys that are getting drafted much higher than him at edge in this very same draft, you get it. People look at his size and his power and they go, oh, he's a great run blocker. He's not. He's good, but that's the part of his game he's going to have to develop. Again, can he do it? Yeah. Did they ask him to do it in a way? And was he effective at that at Tennessee? For the most part, he really
he's not Paris, right?
That's the piece he's going to have to work on. Again, he's got the skills to be able to do it. But if you're a run first team, if you're invested and you got 2-3 running backs, and you really believe that that's the sort of rock you're going to build your church on, Wright might not be as attractive to you as a team. If you're going to drop back in pass sets and want your guy to be protected right now from pretty much whatever, very good pick.
I think when it comes to Wright's run blocking, finishing, yes, amazing. The actual displacement and the getting the angles and all that needs to be clean. It's not that he doesn't have the talent to do it.
Yeah,
because
that's the thing. He's got tools and talent. He can do it.
But you can see, like, when somebody loses their balance on him, he's like, oh baby, he buries them. And I think the highlights make people think he's a better run blocker than he is. No, he's a great finisher.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Yeah. And it's not that he can't, it's that he hasn't given his system. He has the potential with the way we see him move his feet, his speed, his size, and the power and finishing. Like, again, it's kind of like Mozzie Smith, right? Just need to do this with getting yourself to the angle and pushing guys out of the way.
Now, getting to the Seahawks at 20 here. Look at us flying through this thing now. Again, this is an ideal destination.
And another double pick in the first round. We've already
another one.
Texans, Lions, Seahawks. These are the teams. We did a podcast that a lot of people didn't see about the sort of controllers of the draft right after the Shrine Bowl. And it was all these picks that are going to really control the top of the draft because they have multiple picks throughout the first round. There's 4 teams.
Now they went Tyree Wilson at 5. I think a lot of people would expect a Will Levis investment here because he doesn't have to play early behind Geno. You know, they've got receivers, they've got tackles, they can still improve the interior on day 2. They got their premier edge. A lot of people would expect Levis here. I ain't doing it.
I'm not one of those people, just saying.
I know you're not one of those people. I ain't doing it.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm going to stick with the defense. And I'm going to just create the most absurd, lanky press corner room since the Legion of Boom. And we're going to put Joey Porter Jr. across from Tariq Woolen. And every single time a team comes into Seattle, we're going to look across the sideline and say, go ahead, throw a fade. I fucking dare you. Throw a fade right now. And they're not going to be able to do it.
No, it will lock that down completely. That would be a ridiculously fun secondary to watch if they can get Adams back healthy and, you know.
Have we heard about Adams?
It's been extremely quiet. So I said if. But really the young stars there, Tariq Woolen, you're bringing in Joey Porter Jr., who is really physical and intimidating at corner. Teams didn't even really throw at him. Like they knew coming into this year, he's only thrown at like 34 times this year. Like they just didn't even try because he's got crazy long arms. And he plays the boundary very well. He adapted to not being thrown at. That's a really key thing for young, talented corners is when people stop throwing at them, can they still hold that level, find another way to be impactful? Porter did. Still has things to work on, but boy, that would make that secondary imposing.
And there's certain things you just wouldn't be able to run against them.
No,
you just can't do it.
You're not going to be able to find a crack. There would be a lot of teams really pushing the seam. They would be pushing slot and seam concepts. But again, if you're the Seahawks and you can say, well, they're not doing this and they're not doing this, so all we need to do is align to basically defend against these concepts, no matter how dangerous they are.
Yeah.
When you can limit a team's options like that, you become so difficult.
And if you're
on
running
defense.
seam balls against Quandre Diggs, he's just gimme, gimme, gimme.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of space to maneuver.
No.
You know, you've got Kobe to fill in there as well. Like, it would give them a very imposing secondary.
Now that brings us to the Chargers. Technically, my home team now.
It's true.
Now, I want to stress, I do not have any inside information on this.
Okay.
This is
Good to know.
This is not me predicting what they're doing, because I think people would read into that. This is not that. This is a purely what I would do pick based on my evaluation of the roster, their needs, where they need depth, and where they need youth specifically.
I can't wait to hear it, because there's a lot of places the Chargers could go. And if you've been reading mock drafts for the last few months, a lot of places that people go pretty regularly. They're not all the same, but there are 3 or 4 sort of tropes that they hit all the time. So I'm interested to see which
you
way
see
you go.
in mock drafts, you see a lot of Zay Flowers if he's there.
Yep.
He's not. You see a lot of Jalen Hyatt. It ain't Hyatt.
No.
And you see a lot of Dalton Kincaid. There's a medical
Yep.
flag on Kincaid.
Yep.
I don't think he goes in the first round because of that. Also, he's an older prospect. And so I'm pivoting to defense.
Okay.
And I know people are saying, okay, we gotta build around Herbert. Nope. I'm pivoting to the defense. And I'm improving the edge rotation with Nolan Smith, putting him with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Because remember, last year, those 2 guys, older players now, both missed significant time. They didn't really have much else when those guys were out. Nolan Smith would give them somebody who could play edge for them, or you put him on the field at the same time and play like a quasi hybrid Sam type, like a Leonard Floyd type role, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of Georgia. And he could do that too.
Yeah.
Incredible character, incredible work ethic, freak athlete, can play multiple roles. And if Joey or Khalil get hurt again, they're not desperate for edge help anymore. This would be a dynamic trio. And in the absence of being able to improve the receiving core with Zay, since that's not on the table here, I think Nolan Smith is the next best thing.
So everybody has been saying the Chargers need speed, talking about their wide receiver core, and you added speed. You just did it on defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Nolan Smith, versatile. You talked about the fact that he doesn't just have to rush. He is one of the more versatile edge players in this draft because he is so smart. And by smart, I mean football intelligent. He hunts.
Yeah.
First thing I put in my notes when I started watching Nolan Smith was he hunts. He is always hunting for better position, for advantage, to be in the right gap, to make sure he's there. And then when he gets to unleash the physical speed, I was actually surprised when he ran that fast at the combine. I knew he was fast, but he doesn't need to showcase that speed, because there's some guys that gets burned and they sort of turn and run and you're like, wow. And you see the speed all the time, but it's not for a good reason. Smith doesn't have to unleash his speed in most cases because of positioning, because of understanding what an offense is trying to do against him pre-snap. So I didn't think he was that fast because you didn't see it that often. And then some of the pursuit plays where he's really coming from an absurd outside.
That's where you see it.
And he just opens up and catches a running back from behind on outside zone, going away from him. And he was playing wide edge. You're like, that's a ridiculous amount of distance. So I think it's really cool. It's a little offbeat. I love it for that. They do need something extra in that rotation because it's been much lesser when they've lost Downs to injury. It wasn't just last year, the year before that as well. They've been a little bit toothless in the pass rush for multiple reasons. This gives them somebody that can plug in. It gives them versatility, gives them more team speed, which they could use on both sides of the ball, primarily more on the offense. But
well, I was about to say, if they really want somebody who can run 4.3 to get some reps at receiver, you can throw him out there. Try it out. He'll be fine.
I bet he could do it. I wouldn't put it past.
Let him route some
Smith.
people up.
Yeah, and try and press him. Go ahead. No, it's a super fun pick. I love it.
Do I expect it to happen?
No,
not entirely. But if I was the GM, I'd sprint it in. versus the Ravens at 22. And they have been sniped repeatedly in this mock from everybody that's ever been linked to them ever.
Well, you just did it with the Seahawks.
I did it with I took
that
Joey
was the
Porter.
most like.
And Ravens fans really want Joey Porter Jr. just to stick it to Joey Porter Sr.
He was asked yesterday, Joey Porter Jr., that is, whether or not his dad would wear a Ravens jersey. He was drafted. He said yes. He said yes. I don't believe him, but he said yes. So, anyways, you've sniped them with the Seahawks. What'd you end up with?
So the Ravens are another one of these teams, and you look at their roster, especially since the signing, and I still believe that Odell has gas. You look at the roster, and you're like, okay, they got receivers I like. They could use more depth, but Zay's not there. JSN's not there. Do I want to go Addison? I don't know. Quentin Johnson's a no for me here this early. There's going to be receivers on day 2 that we can fill this out. Tight end, fine. Running back, fine. Quarterback, we assume is going to be fine. Maybe, possibly.
We'll
hopefully.
find out.
Offensive line, starting 5. Totally fine with it. Depth, not there. And then on defense, again, it's a whole bunch of really good players, but the depth. So it's like starting 22 versus the other 31 players are 2 very different worlds. And I think that's why the Ravens constantly get in trouble, is because their starting 22 is so good. And when they're fully operational, they can beat anybody. And then they get hurt again, and again, every year they get hurt constantly. And so
Is it fair to call them the Chargers East?
Oh, it might be worse. Yeah. They lost like 3 running backs in a week.
Yeah.
A couple seasons ago. Like, it's bad. And so I want to attack depth, and more specifically, I want to attack depth in the secondary. And I want somebody who can play multiple spots, who can still be a day 1 starter, but if dudes go down, if Marcus Williams goes down, if Kyle Hamilton, God forbid, goes down, somebody who can also play safety, somebody who missed 4 tackles in his entire career at Alabama, blows up screen games with reckless abandon. That's Brian Branch, nickel/safety from Bama. Not the elite tester, but an elite football player. Mm-hmm. And on tape, there's just not really anything wrong. And even when he gets beat, the time speed, that's what's interesting, is the time speed I didn't expect, because his recovery in pads is not 4.6.
No.
And I just think he's such a damn good football player. And, Sidney Brown is like right there for me as well. Jartavius Martin is right there for me as well in a similar role. But in terms of fit with the Ravens specifically, I felt like Branch is a better fit for what they want/need. And if all else fails and they can't get Porter, they can't get Banks, they can't get Zay or JSN. If all else fails, they can take Brian Branch and feel really good about it.
Yeah, I assume the chat is full of Jacksonville Jaguar tears right now because Branch has been mocked to them pretty relentlessly and is a great fit there as well. I love bumping him up and putting him in the back of the Baltimore secondary. The time speed thing, there's been a lot of variance with time speed this year and a lot of to the slower side. You were at the USC Pro Day. It had rained like crazy. It was the same at UCLA, and there were all these crazy times and people, DMing me like, what happened to blank? Why did he run? I was like, it's not the thing. And Branch was a little bit like that at the combine because I led off defensive gems on the Bootleg podcast this year with Brian Branch for a reason. He was one of my early favorites in this class where I watched a couple of tapes and I was like, that guy's a winner as a football player. I want him on my football team. And I said in that video, famously, he can run with anybody down the seam because he can on tape. And they went to the combine and it was like, oh, Brian Branch is slow because he ran slow at the combine. Slow, 4.6, but slow for his position. I was like, put the pads on him, man. He'll gain a 10th and a half. Like, he runs with very fast guys in the SEC on tape. You do not see him getting run by. Like,
at least not often.
You see people getting steps on him. Yes, especially at the end of deep routes. 20, 22, 25 yards down the field. Yeah, they might have a step. But you don't see people just blowing his doors off. He's fast on the football field.
And as a nickel, at least with the types of coverages that Bama was playing as a nickel, he wasn't carrying verticals that often anyway.
Yeah. And when he did, he looked fine doing it.
Yeah.
And then he brings everything else around the line of scrimmage that we love so much. I think he very much plays like a Raven. We talked about plays like a Raider. Like his style of play, I mean, him and Kyle Hamilton coming forward, like, get out of here.
Hunter in the chat says he couldn't run with Tennessee receivers. Find me a DB that runs with Jalen Hyatt.
There's a lot of NFL DBs that can't run with Jalen Hyatt. We're going to see that.
That's a rare
next
thing.
year. And you can always pick an example. Let me be clear about this. You can pick an example on any player, pro or college. And I could say he's powerful, or he's agile, or he doesn't give up the edge, or he can run with anybody. And anybody, and I mean anybody, with a 5-minute Google search can find you a play where it happens.
Yeah.
And say, "Whoa, no one is flawless. No one is faultless. Everybody has moments." But in general, if you watch enough of Brian Branch at Alabama, you go, I'm fine with his functional play speed in a very fast league.
Especially for the role of nickel and what he's going to be asked to do.
I no concerns on that whatsoever.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Sorry, Hunter. Didn't mean to pick on you, Hunter. I just wanted to bring up that point of like,
it happens.
It's Jalen Hyatt. Like, come on now.
Yeah, it's funny. Jordan Reed, our buddy Jordan Reed, who's NFL draft analyst for ESPN, was posting some of his favorite memories from being out on the road this fall.
Mm-hmm.
He did it a couple days ago and said, "Hey, these are some of the things." And he said you can feel Hyatt's speed when you're on the field. Like he's on the sideline watching him warm up, just tosses, and he's like, you can feel Jalen Hyatt's speed when you're close to him.
He's somebody who ran like 4.41, and that was considered a disappointment. It's
he might, again, like Branch, isn't he faster than that? He might be in pads.
Yeah. All right, let's get to 23 with the Cardinals. 20 picks after they were supposed to pick. Remember, we did that Vikings trade. Vikings went all the way up to 3.
The Cardinals are now loaded with their new GM with picks for the foreseeable future.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to have like 5 very high picks coming out of that trade.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define high, because the Vikings are never going to be bad, right? So they're probably going to be picks.
But I mean, first round picks.
Yeah.
Like first round and second round picks. You're going to have at least 5 of those, given the height of this move,
which they desperately need.
Of course.
And we're going to start off rebuilding that roster by giving them the edge help that they still desperately need. And that's Will McDonald from Iowa State.
Ooh.
If you asked me what would you rather have, Will McDonald plus at minimum 3 extra picks that are all in the top 50 versus Tyree Wilson, which is who if they stick at 3, that's who I would have taken, was Tyree Wilson, right? I would probably lean towards McDonald and 3 extra picks. And I love Tyree, but Will McDonald's awesome. Great burst, great bend, arsenal of pass rush moves, showed up at the Senior Bowl. And the big thing is like, oh, can he rush the passer? Because he was in the Iowa State system where he played a lot of 5 technique and wasn't given as many true pass rush opportunities as a lot of other edges. Showed up at the Senior Bowl and just killed everybody. Absolutely murdered everybody. Even tackles that are going in day 1 in this mock draft, he was beating them. And I see him as a first round player. I think he has first round talent. I think that he's an underrated technician. I don't really have a lot of complaints with Will McDonald. Like, is he experienced in coverage if you're trying to drop him back? Because again, he's on the lighter side. He came in at the combine at like 240, 45, something like that. So theoretically, you're like, okay, is he somebody who can go backwards and forwards like Nolan Smith? We don't know. He didn't really do it at Iowa State. Yeah. But he's such a good athlete, I'm willing to give him a shot. So at 23, I think this is appropriate value. I think this is about where he's going to go tomorrow night. And it's a haul for the Cardinals, and they get a damn good player to boot.
I like the fit because of the new coaching staff in Arizona. I have much more confidence that they're going to be able to take a player like Will McDonald and use him appropriately. Which his college team did not do. Let's be honest. I would say Will McDonald is a first round projection, not necessarily a first round player, because there were so few true pass rush reps where we really got to see him turn it loose. And when he did, he was very good in those. And you wanted to see more of them. but he hasn't done it a lot. He's still got a lot of learning to do. You do bet on athletes at that position, maybe more so than any other position in the draft. And he is that. He has the athletic traits to succeed there. He has the coaching staff in place to let him succeed there that will probably use him in a better way, not hard to do, than Iowa State did. So, but this is potential. This is a swing to say, we believe when given the chance to rush correctly, his athleticism will come to bear and he will win. There's a lot of ifs there.
Yeah.
Right. But if that fails in any way, you've got 3 other first round picks because of the way you did it. And draft logic states that's a more prudent course of action, is get yourself more lottery tickets because they're not all going to hit.
Now, chat was wondering why I didn't go Miles Murphy, because in my rankings, I have Miles Murphy as a tier 1 edge and Will McDonald as a tier 2 edge. Why go one over the other? For me, it's a little bit about system fit, right? And they play a lot of odd fronts there, or will play a lot of odd fronts there this year. And I think having somebody who can either put his hand stand up is a little bit more important. And even though one's tier 1 and one's tier 2, the overall grade, not that far off. They're both going to be first round picks. Yeah. And so I was kind of more leaning into role and system fit than just pure grade. Miles Murphy will appear on this mock very soon, but just not in Arizona.
Good to know. I rate them differently because I have them as different positions. McDonald is purely an edge for me, and Miles Murphy is a DE.
Yeah.
Now there's some overlap between those two, but it's sort of like emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to see your Murphy fit when it comes.
The Jaguars. Who are they going to pick if Brian Branch?
If their golden boy is no longer
Brian
there.
Branch isn't available. What do the Jaguars do? And this is another team that we think, borderline, we know is going to be in the market for a tackle. Not even borderline. They're in the market for a tackle. Okay. They're in the market for a tackle.
We're gonna stamp that definitively.
So again, this is like the hybrid, like half predictive, half what I would do mock. This is more of a predictive pick to me. And I'm going to go with DeJuan Jones, offensive tackle at Ohio State, specifically to play right tackle for them. Walker Little, I think, acquitted himself well on the left side last year. And Cam Robinson, even if Cam Robinson's playing this year, his contract is actually very cuttable, and they save a bunch of money after this season. It's like $17.5 million that they save. So I don't necessarily think that Cam Robinson is a long-term answer for them anyway. And so even if DeJuan Jones as a rookie is a swing tackle, I still believe that it's the prudent move, because I think they're going to want to save money next year with the impending Trevor Lawrence extension and everything that comes with that. And their roster is starting to get a lot more expensive. I mean, it already was expensive. They went on a crazy spending spree last year, but
yes,
they got to save money somewhere. And I think it's going to be with Cam Robinson. So getting ahead of that and taking DeJuan Jones here is what I expect to happen. Slightly early for him. If I was just going straight on how I stack players on a big board, right? Slightly early, but considering positional importance and the fact that they ain't getting one on day, again, that's why all these tackles are going round 1, and we're going to get potentially up to 7 in round 1 because of that, because you cannot get one after the first round.
We're getting to the point in the draft where comments we make about one player at one position are going to just wash over onto another position. All of you just said about Will McDonald as a projection at edge, go for DeJuan Jones at tackle.
Yeah.
However, he is the blocker that people think Darnell Wright is. Massive.
How could you not be at that size?
Well, there are big guys that can't block their way out of a bag. I mean, Duke says that all the time, but DeJuan Jones, mountain of a human being, 6'8", 374. Strangely enough, the second longest arms in this draft among top tackles.
Who's the longest?
Or no, top arms, 36.38 as opposed to 36.4 1.8
Oh, okay.
for
Gotcha.
Paris,
Yeah.
who both played for the same team in
know.
college.
And
which
people wonder
is-
why Stroud was never pressured. It took Georgia to disrupt that pocket.
This is the reason. But DeJuan Jones is going to figure it out. Second highest run block grade in this class is a mountain. And if he latches onto you, which he generally does because of that wingspan and his just overall frame size, he engulfs people. And the projection about him growing into a pass protector, yeah, you're going to see it. He's going to win differently. He's just going to win with frame size. Takes a while to run around somebody that's 6'8" with 36-inch arms, like just physically. So the arc gets bigger. He doesn't have to move his feet as much. He doesn't as much in pass pro. It'll come. But again, this is if we don't get one here, what does it look like if we get one farther on down? I think Travis Etienne immediately goes, "Oh yeah, love this pick. This is awesome. Let me run and right more this year." It is about opportunity cost and what happens if we don't do this.
Yeah, which is Trevor has to run for his life, and that's not what we want, right? Before I get to the Giants at pick 25, because that is a doozy. I want to get ahead of this because some people might click off. We do have a Q&A stream later this afternoon. We have like a 3-hour break, and then over on the Bootleg Football Podcast channel from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, we're doing a 2-hour Q&A. So if you have questions, especially about the next pick, if you have questions and you want to either come ask or berate me repeatedly over it, stop by the Bootleg Football Podcast channel. That's linked down in the description below. We have episodes come out every week. We're going to be live during every single pick of the draft for all 3 days, giving live analysis. No breaks. We never do any breaks.
Well, you never.
Well, I never do any breaks because I cut my teeth in NFL Red Zone where P breaks are frowned upon. Not by management. It's just we set personal goals.
You may frown all you want. It's not a goal I set. I'm going to take a break, get a drink, go to the bathroom, maybe do a little Bears draft report with Windy City. I take breaks. He doesn't take breaks.
I go all the way.
That's right.
Because I care about you, the audience. No, but we're every single pick. If you want coverage of every single pick and not just long stretches of not talking about players that are getting taken, come by the Bootleg Football Podcast. We got you covered.
Strangely enough,
what?
ESPN has pivoted in how they cover day 3, and their head of programming talked about this. So Matt Miller was lobbied for to be added to the table by Mel Kiper because they realized on day 3, they have hardcore fans coming in that want to know information about every draft pick. Hence us. What we started doing 4 years ago. But ESPN realized that even up to about 3 years ago, they said day 3 was really for entertainment, vamping, bringing in celebrities to talk about whatever. And they realized, no, we want to go into hardcore analysis. I'm like, we were leading the charge here. And the whole reason that we do it and bring information on every pick is because we know that there's so many of you out there that want that. They want to know this is how you build rosters on day 3. What are those players like? What are their strengths? What are their potential fits? So we'll be doing all that on Bootleg all 3 days, but ESPN's following.
So what you're really saying is ignore Mel Kiper and Matt Miller.
No.
Ignore the massive names in draft media. Come by us.
I'm just saying they came to it after us. We were first.
Yeah. No, and we don't take commercial breaks. So
no commercials.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to pick 25. Giants fans waiting on bated breath.
There's no gravity on this that you've set up.
I want to emphasize I'm not alone in this. Okay.
You might be in this room, but
I talked to 3 people that are either in the league or have connections in the top 30 grades on this player. I'm not alone.
Okay.
Corey Trice, corner, Purdue. Come on down. You're a New York Giant.
I can see why you said what you said. Luckily, I love Trice as a player. It is early for me, but not really early. A lot of people will think this is wild early, like 2 rounds too early. I'm sure chat's full of it at the moment.
There it goes.
Yeah, there it goes. Just had to catch up. It was probably bogged down with the thousands of angry comments you've created.
Oh, God.
Corey Trice, great player. A little bit early. Love the fit in terms of that defense because you've got nasty interior offensive line or defensive line. You've got a guy now that can hold up on the outside with great size, great speed, much more fluid than he has any right to be at his size. Like him a lot. I'm not sure I like him pick 20x, but if Corey Trice goes, in the first half of the second round, I think general sort of draft fans, you're going to go bananas. If he goes here, yeah, it's going to be a bell ringing moment.
You can tell this is a what I would do pick and not a what I expect to happen pick.
Yes.
He's CB5 for me.
Mine too. It worked out that way.
But in terms of my grade on Trice, I look, okay, it's a 6'3", 205-pound corner, great size, legit 4.4 speed, unreasonably loose hips and quick feet for a guy his size.
Yep.
He can play 7 yards off a receiver in off-man coverage, T-step and driving the ball like he's 5'11", 195. It makes no sense. He's a phenomenal athlete, great press technician. I think, you could have him play like a Jaron Kearse type safety role as just a tight end eraser, and he would excel at it.
Yeah.
But it's almost wasting that, right? Because
feels like not enough for his skills.
For what he can do against receivers, too. I think he's a day one starting corner. I think he's really not that far off Joey Porter, and he's more versatile than Joey Porter. He just does not get enough credit, and he's a great fit for what the Giants want, which is versatility. They want to be able to run a whole bunch of different stuff. They want guys who can hold up in man coverage because they pressure a lot. Yep. But not just press man. They want off man. They want ability to disguise so they can throw all this different stuff. Because if you're lined up in press man right in somebody's face, there's only so many things you can call from that alignment, right? So they want the ability to, if they back off a corner, they could still be in man coverage and not get killed. Corey Trice is a perfect fit for the Giants. Again, I understand he's not going to go this early in the draft, but I'm just planting my flag in the ground that even if he goes in the second round, he's going to produce a round player. That's how I see him.
Yeah, I learned my lesson on this one, and strangely enough, it's a lesson from when I met you, which was the Senior Bowl 2020. And I had a theory that one Chase Claypool would make a fantastic tight end. And that lasted all of about 4 weeks. And then he went to the combine. He ran like Megatron. And I was like, whoop, there goes that theory. It was nice while it lasted. Turns out.
And now some people are like, maybe Chase Claypool's a tight end.
Could still be. We all get to come back around and grab for that. But I started in a similar place on Trice. Watched Corey Trice, and I went, damn. First thing I said, why is nobody talking about him? He's got great size. He's liquid quick, especially coming forward with his face towards the quarterback. He's physical at the catch point. Like, he seems really good to me. And I thought, all right, again, just the quick sort of cursory watch. This guy would make a tremendous safety, just like you said, like a Jaron Kearse tight end eraser role. I said, yeah, I'm going to move him to safety. And when I come back, I'm going to watch him with the rest of the safeties and see how I feel about that. Because I feel like he could be a really good safety. Second watch, get back, watch more tape against different types of receivers, against different alignments. And I was like, nope, we're just going to accelerate the Chase Claypool program and go right back to corner. For what you said, feels like not enough. Feels like you would be shorting him in that role. Even though he would be excellent at it, you'd be taking things off the table that he could do as a starting corner, and he just climbed the ranks. You said fifth because you ranked him before I ranked mine, and I was like, I don't know if he's going to be fifth, but he's going to be close. Turns out he ended up fifth for me as well, because I kept doing that thing you do where you slot it and you say, is he better than this guy? Is he better than this guy? And I kept stacking him going, nope. And especially when you get in potential, but he already plays at that level. He plays at that play speed. It's not a time speed like on the field. You see that burst. You see the length. You see him using all those gifts. And you're like, I don't know why more people aren't talking about Corey Trice.
As an aside, I was talking to Galco about him because he was the first person I texted. I was like, am I nuts?
Yeah.
And Shrine Bowl, they evaluate everybody. They have over 1,000 grades every single year. They're a month away from wrapping up their 2024 grades on, I think it was a little over 1,100 players, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know he wasn't there, but like, where where did you guys have Trice when you guys were stacking this class months ago?
Yeah.
And he said, non-quarterback players. He was 22nd overall on their board. And they got a full scouting staff.
Yeah.
With like league experience, like 22nd overall player in the class, non-quarterback. Now, obviously, he didn't end up going to the Shrine, but like that's usually Eric's board lines up pretty well with team boards.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of interest if you look at the position in terms of value, if you look at traits and how successful guys were just last year that came out with similar size speed profiles. It's going to be a pretty easy sell in draft rooms to go, hey, do you want another Tariq Woolen?
Yeah.
I got one. Like, it's not the same player, but it's a similar size profile. It will be used as a comp. And with the season that Tariq Woolen had, arguably, could have been defensive rookie of the year had it not been for one Sauce Gardner. Like, that's a pretty easy sell over the table.
All right. Let's stay in the NFC East. We got the Cowboys at 26. Now, I mentioned Miles Murphy will be taken in the first round in this mock. And this is where I got Miles Murphy going because he reminds me of DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah.
And I think who better to learn under than the actual DeMarcus Lawrence?
Yeah.
Just a big-ass base end that can play 5 technique, can kick inside on passing down, super strong.
Yeah.
Great speed to power. Like, he plays very similarly to DeMarcus. And, oh, by the way, he's a badass against the run, just like DeMarcus. And you put him and DeMarcus and Micah and Dorrance and all these guys in the same front. Good luck. Good luck. Third down's a nightmare against Dallas. So this is more of a value pick. Just having a tier 1 edge fall down to 26, especially one with a skill set that we know Dallas covets because they've always had that.
Yeah.
I think it's a match made in heaven. Maybe not likely, but it's something I would do for sure.
Well, you have a type because this is, by my count, third time in the first round that you've done this.
Yeah.
Taking it, you did it with Philadelphia, you did it with Chargers, and now doing it with Dallas of saying, hey, we've got some good talent in our defensive line. We want more. We want more options. We want backups. We want guys that can fill in case of injuries. We want versatility in the case of the Chargers pick. And this is similar in terms of, hey, we already have a player like that. We want more of those players because now what are you going to do? And it speaks to the importance of defensive line, lines in general. We've had a run on offensive tackles. That was our ostensible theme of the day. Maybe this is the secret theme of the day, right? Is that lines are really important and that teams are going to invest very high picks, lots of draft capital in making sure that those lines hold up, because if they don't, they know what's going to happen.
And I'm a sucker for big defensive ends that can play the run because it feels like every year we get inundated with small speed rushers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fun and they're flashy, but not all of them can actually play on all 3 downs.
No.
And so I've always felt that the players that have utility on first and 10 and 2nd and 5 and 3rd and 7 are more important than the players who have utility on 3rd and 7. And I think Miles Murphy is a classic case of that. Is he as good of a pass rusher as Will McDonald? In my opinion, no. But he is, I think, potentially going to be a better overall player because of the role that he plays. At least for Dallas's system. I don't think Miles fits Arizona, but for Dallas, I think he could be a better player than Will McDonald would have been in Dallas.
Yes, and one of the reasons I feel good about this fit for Murphy is everybody wants Murphy to get back to his 21 tape when he was playing under Brent Venables at Clemson. And if I'm looking at an NFL staff that I want to have some fairly high confidence that they can take players who weren't achieving and have them achieve a high level of success. You mentioned Dorrance Armstrong. He was one of mine when he was coming out. Mm-hmm. He ends up here and making a big difference. Like, Miles Murphy is a much higher starting point than Dorrance Armstrong, and this staff could easily get him back to that level. And that is a scary prospect for the NFC East foes because Murphy's high level play is star power stuff.
Yeah. Now, EJ, you might have thought wrongly that we were done with offensive tackle. We are not.
I don't think so, because we are nearing the point of the first round where the 5th year of control becomes a thing.
And not only that, but there are still teams in the back end, elite teams in the back end, that need tackle help, either starter or potential future starters.
That's right.
And so my 7th offensive tackle of the first round is going to be Matthew Bergeron, staying in upstate New York. He's a Buffalo Bill, incredibly talented player. Spencer Brown, I don't know if I see it, between durability issues and just, he was so good so early and then just became maddeningly inconsistent. And I feel like tackle sneakier need for the Bills than people give it credit for. A lot of people keep saying receiver. Again, there's no Zay Flowers here. There's no JSN here. And Addison, I strongly considered. But knowing, again, theme of the day, that if I pass on Bergeron here, I ain't getting him later. And that I still have an outside shot at many receivers 30 picks from now.
Yeah.
I had to go Bergeron. I know it's early. I understand it's early, but that's how tackle runs work in the NFL. We see them every year. It's either tackle or it's corner or it's pass rusher. In a position that is thin, that's the ones that have runs. Tackle is thin. There will be a shitload of them taken. And Matt Bergeron is my 7th and final tackle of the first round.
Yes, that's how runs work, and runs stop. And I think this might be the pick that stops it.
This is like we are on the edge of the cliff and somebody's grabbing the belt to pull you back, right? Like,
yeah,
that's it.
This is the first one that feels really reachy to me. Like,
yeah.
DeJuan Jones was like, hey, you can argue that one on potential, and you're getting a run blocker right now to sort of build your game around. I get it. Bergeron in the first round, not even at the very end of the first round. I understand teams not wanting to basically bet their entire season on the fact that a player like Spencer Brown is going to play well or play back up to a previously high level. Because if it doesn't, or if he gets injured or anything else, then what do you have? And the answer on the Bills roster is much.
Have you seen the Bills, like as a total offense, the Bills EPA per play, like when Spencer Brown was hurt versus injured, like they don't have anything else.
Yeah,
they don't. No, and Spencer Brown's inconsistent as it is.
So I can see it, but this is the first one that feels reachy. I would not be surprised if in upstate New York there is hue and cry that it was a reach. He already has a lot of built-in fans there. It's, few hours between where he played college and where he would end up playing pro ball. This is not anti-Matthew Bergeron. He's a good player. Solid player who has potential, just like all these players, to become a very solid NFL player, and in that role could work. Right tackle, I can see a lot of people are projecting him to guard. I think he can play tackle. Certainly a stronger run blocker than pass blocker. Like I get it. But I would, if I was a Bills fan, I would be like, oh.
Well, because Bills fans are like Jordan Addison, Jordan Addison.
Outside of receiver, like we had talked a lot, we didn't think it would happen, but if Bijan had gotten to the spot, it would have been an absolute slam dunk.
Yeah.
There's a lot of desire for that. Folks who understand line play will understand the reasoning. I still don't think they may agree with the particular player fit.
He's a phenomenal athlete.
Yes.
Incredible physical upside. Still young, still new-ish to the game, right? Still growing and developing. This is absolutely a swing for the fences developmental pick. But if it hits, they're sitting pretty with one of the better tackle duos in the AFC, and that's saying a lot. It really is. So it's a gamble, but in this particular class, the 27th pick was probably going to be a gamble no matter what.
If I was Brandon Beane, I'll put on my GM hat for a minute. I would sweat bullets and see how far I could wait on one Blake Freeland from BYU.
I'm convinced he's like top 70. Not that he's like one of the 70 best players in the class, but just because
which is why you would be sweating bullets.
Such a good athlete.
Like if they wait till their natural pick in the second round, it's going to be touch and go. He'll probably be gone, especially with a run like this.
Yeah.
So at what point, this is chicken at the highest level, and this is why the draft is fascinating, is because it's high stakes poker, millions and millions and millions of dollars on every pick, especially the ones up high. If I'm Brandon Beane, I take somebody else here, and we talk about who that was, but I take somebody else here and I wait on Freeland. And when I feel real nervous in the second round, maybe I trade up a little bit in the second round because the cost will be less, and I get a Blake Freeland, who I feel as good about with physical developmental potential, because he's an even better athlete than Bergeron, which is crazy. One of the best tackle athletes in this class.
He just has no goddamn idea what he's doing.
That's
my thing with
young,
Freeland.
And he's figuring it out, but
Yeah.
it's like betting on pass rushers who are great athletes and don't know what they're doing yet.
Yeah.
Freeland is a great athlete at a position you want great athletes at. And you hope that you can mold them in, and you'd pay a lesser cost. You'd get somebody else in the first round. That's what I would do, but I would be super nervous, because after that, good luck. There's a couple of other players you might take a swing on, but it would probably be even later than that, and it just keeps ratcheting up.
All right, Bengals 28. We know with 95% certainty who their pick's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm not making that pick. I disagree with it. I'm not doing it. I'm not putting my name on it. This is if I was doing a fully predictive mock, I know who I would put, and it ain't this guy. And I'll let you guys, when it happens again, you'll be in the stream with us. You'll see our reaction analysis at that point. So I'm going to stick with the player that I would take here. And I'm going to go with Cam Smith, corner out of South Carolina.
Ooh, I like it.
Who I have a way higher grade overall on. And I think there's talk of, okay, is Darius Rush better? Is Cam Smith better? They're different players.
Mm-hmm.
Similar grade, very different skill sets. And I think specifically for what the Bengals need, which is a guy who can play in space and who isn't necessarily as narrow as Darius Rush. Like Darius Rush, I don't really trust him in off coverage. I more trust him in soft shoe press, where he's not even jamming guys. He's just kind of mirroring
college press.
Yeah, well, that's what Sherm did in Seattle, but Sherm could also, get in your face and do all that kind of stuff. I don't think Darius Rush has Sherman potential, but he is very comfortable in soft shoe press, not super comfortable playing off and in space. Whereas Cam Smith does both. But I think primarily when you look at the Bengals corners, a lot of the time they're off and they're playing in space and they're mirroring and reacting. And it's really all about footwork and short area explosiveness with how they like their DBs to play top down. They don't like to get beat deep. And so they play top down they call it playing from the shelf, right?
Yeah.
And so I think Cam Smith fits that style for them because he's got phenomenal feet, phenomenal bursts, great hips, willing tackler in space, smaller guy, but will hit you. And he's just super solid, super reliable. And I think his upside to me, a little bit higher than Darius Rush, even though Darius Rush, I think day one might be for some teams considered safer, considering the style that he plays. Like a lot of press heavy teams, I think would prefer Rush, but I think Cam Smith's upside's higher for me. And I think if I was going to take one of them in the first round, it would be Cam Smith.
I agree with the second thing you said more than the first thing you said. If I was going to take one of them in the first round, I think it would be Cam Smith for me as well. I don't think I know. It would be Cam Smith. I think Rush is seen as the one with the higher potential, especially because of his frame and the fact that he recently transitioned to the position he's still learning.
Yeah.
So I would say his potential's higher. I say Smith's floor he's going to play at a higher level as a rookie, I think, because he's more developed as a corner. I like his game better. And it's funny, give him to the Bengals because in an on-field sense, not an off-field sense, we need to make that distinction. He gives me some Pac-Man vibes.
Oh, I actually like that.
Yeah, on field,
Yeah.
like there's some similarity to their game
where he's on you in a hiccup, right? Yeah.
Uses that athleticism, has that aggressiveness we talked about with a bunch of corners, will tackle. That was an underrated part of Pac-Man's game. Yeah, and again, on field, not off field, big separation with that particular player, but a little bit of an echo to a previous player that they've had in that secondary. Love the fit.
Now, getting to 29 with Saints, this is a little bit of a lucky pick because I do think that they still need some receiver help. Even if Michael Thomas is coming back healthy and we know what Olave is, he's great. I still think they need at least a third guy.
Sure.
And Jordan Addison happens to be on the board. And here's about where I'm thinking, okay, this is the sweet spot for Jordan Addison. So we're going to lock him in. He's going to be our third receiver with Olave and Tom. Not that they only have two receivers. Like they have a decent receiving core. But I think the potential star power that Jordan Addison can bring next to Olave, you got two guys that are really, really good at tracking the deep ball. You got two guys who can play Z, who can play in the slot. Mm-hmm. Michael Thomas offers you a big slot option, but he can also play X if he's healthy. You got all these guys that can move around and two legitimate deep ball threats in Addison and Olave. And I think Derek would love having that ability to go deep on either side of the field and not just I'm looking at Chris. Now it's I'm looking at Chris and I'm looking at Jordan, and we'll see which one the safety chooses, and I'll kill the other guy. Like that's I think key for the Saints this year is to have multiple explosive options in the receiving core, and now they do.
I'm super glad you brought Carr up because I think he's the biggest part of this for me. Is he seems to tend to succeed when he has a multitude of targets. Some quarterbacks are better when they have the guy. Mm-hmm. They're focused, they can lock in. Carr's had both. He's had a long enough career that he's had situations where he's had one guy that he's had to lock in on, whether it's because of injury or just that's all the team had at that particular time. And then he's had seasons where he's had a sort of full array of targets to go to. And it seems like he really had some of those early season surges, in Las Vegas or as a Raider when he had 3 or 4 guys hitting at a high level. Mm-hmm. And if you get them closer to that, them being the Saints now with Addison, Olave, we'll see what Thomas is. We like some of their options at tight end. They could, again, go tight end later in this draft. It's really deep there. You start to set Derek Carr up, a veteran quarterback, to be in a position that he's had great success in before. And I feel like that's a safety net, like we've talked about with the Lions, making sure not only succession planning for whenever Thomas leaves, but also just building that bench and saying, all right, we got a lot of ways we can come at you. I think that move sort of organizationally on multiple levels for New Orleans.
Eagles back on the clock.
Howie.
At 30, collecting value. And I know people look at more secondary help here. And that's possible. Like, again, there's some corners that I really like in my rankings that would make sense. Like, would I be shocked like for a wild DJ Turner pick here? No. Would it completely blow me away if they took Jalen Hyatt or Quentin Johnston just because fuck you, we're going to score 40 points a game? No, wouldn't shock me. Mm-mm. But there is a particular player who has fallen who I don't think should have fallen this far. Even in my own mock, I'm like, wow, Brett, how did you not take him earlier? Mm-hmm. That's going to be Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. He's going to end up as my TE1, all things considered, because of the injury and age flags with Kincaid. If that didn't exist, Kincaid would be probably TE1 for me, but it is what it is. But Michael Mayer, I have a higher grade on him than Darnell Washington. I have a higher grade on him than Musgrave. And I think in terms of steady Eddie, stable, reliable tight end that can do multiple things for you. He can play Y. He can play off as like an H-back. He can block. You could put him in the slot. He could be a big slot. It's basically just having another Dallas Goedert. And the only thing better than having Dallas Goederts is having 2 Dallas Goederts. Yeah. So giving Hurts another weapon at a value, at a position that is historically kind of hard to draft.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to find a good one. So if the best tight end in the class is at 30, I kind of feel like pulling the trigger here is appropriate. So now you don't just have to run 11 personnel. You can run 12 personnel all day and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, the rich getting richer, and that's been the theme of the Eagles for a good 2 or 3 years now, with the way Howie has cashed picks, spent money, built the team, grabbed veterans in trade to build that roster. We saw him make a really deep run last year. And, I don't think Eagles fans would hate this at all. Mayer as a player is really fascinating. I was just watching him and Kincaid last night, going round and round about that. Kincaid's still going to end up as a top for me. The injury is the flag, but again, we don't get the injury information. We know it's there, but I still think the ceiling's higher, but the floor with Mayer is extremely high, and he does a lot of little things really well.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't separate particularly well later in routes. He's not a guy that's just going to run away from you. He makes a lot of catches covered, but he makes the catches. He's a very good contested catcher. I think that's a very well-known part of his game. One of the things I picked up again on last night is his release game.
Yeah, did you see that touchdown he got on Ronnie Hickman?
Well, there's two. So you're talking about the one where he makes a little outside stab move and he's instantly open inside. It looks every bit like a Jordan Addison rep. It's ridiculous. But he does it over and over again. And he does that both at the line and at his first cut. Like if his first cut's 3 yards or 5 yards. He's got really good little feet, excellent hands. Isn't as athletic as a guy like Kincaid. Like, he's not as fast. He doesn't jump as much, but he uses every bit of athleticism he has to reach out, and he makes the plays. And he makes more explosive plays than you think by number. Like, when you look at his stats, you'd think, oh, well, he's going to be reliable, short to medium zone. Like, he's not going to be the stretch the field guy. His explosive play rate is really close to Kincaid. Like, startling, because if you watch the tape, you would never say that. Much better blocker than almost anybody besides Washington in this class at the tight end position. Very, very high floor player. Perfect sort of end of the first round. Like, hazy player. We've got one, but we can have another one.
5 years of contract control in a position that typically takes 2 years to get going. Like, that's the thing is, like, a lot of people say, day 2 is where you get tight ends. Yeah, like, true. A lot of good tight ends go day 2. Yep. I think Goddard was day 2 pick, actually. Yep. But here's the problem. By the time those day 2 tight ends typically get going,
you got to pay them.
So I kind of feel like if there's a guy who you feel really good about, that okay, we can go 5 years without having to pay him, and we'll get 3 productive years out of him before we have to give him a shitload of money.
It might be 4. He's super experienced.
Yeah. I love him. He's a great player. People overthink him.
They do. I did for a while. I've come back to him. He still hasn't come all the way to the top spot, but just because Kincaid has, man, he's got star power.
All right. Last pick.
Bum, bum, bum.
Super Bowl champion Chiefs. There is a type that the Chiefs have when it comes to edge rusher.
Yep. Spags likes him a certain way.
Big, tall, powerful, have the turning radius of a continental drift. They have a type.
They do.
I am going against that type because I fucking hate it. I know everybody's saying like, I see Keon White coming a mile away. No, we're not doing that here. They already have 4 of them.
Yeah.
No, we're going BJ Ojulari. We're getting some speed. We're getting some bend. We're getting some flash. We're getting something they don't have. And that's BJ Ojulari.
I don't know that that's a big a deviation as you might think. He is broad and long,
but he can sink his hip. Like that's the thing is like the other guys have that, but they can't. Right. They can't bend.
In terms of movement, certainly out of his lower half, yes, it's a deviation. In terms of like his physical play and frame and what he can grow into, he just turned 21 this month. Like he was 20 when the pre-draft process started.
He's a puppy, man,
and he has a tremendous amount of unblocked pressures in his resume right now, which is not his fault. Like they schemed him open on loop stunts, mostly on loop stunts at LSU, but very powerful mover with quickness, with bend, with length, two things that you always talk about in terms of being able to combine them, right? If you have length and bend, it's a mess for offensive tackles trying to get a hand on you, because you can basically long arm and then just let your arm go and dip, and there's nothing,
just miss.
There's nothing to catch anymore. Ojulari it has all those skills. He showcases them sometimes. He has a more advanced arsenal of rush moves than a lot of rushers in this class. I think that gets sort of short sold. He's got at least 3 good moves right now, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a college pass rusher, it's a very solid repertoire.
A 20-year-old college pass rusher.
I think he is good where he is. He's got a lot of building blocks, and he's gonna get better. So taking a stab at the end of the first round to, again, build your defensive room and put in some skills you didn't necessarily think you had, don't hate it at all.
I will say I was back and forth a lot because the grades are like identical between BJ Ojulari, Derek Hall, and Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Doesn't pick one. It doesn't matter.
Any K-State player
I don't think it matters between those 3. I really don't.
You're getting a good player.
Yeah.
I actually have the other 2 rated higher than Ojulari, but Ojulari's potential is, his ceiling is perhaps above the other 2. I love Hall because he's super experienced. The SEC, he's got 40 games in the SEC. He's very powerful. He's very quick. He brings all the tools, and they're sort of prepackaged. Felix, we talked about in Defensive Gems, and have talked about many times since. Also a full slate of tools. You start off with the power and the long arms and whatever, and then you go, holy crap, he can do that on a jump cut. Like, yikes. So again, tough to miss. Like, Chiefs are sitting pretty for what they need.
Well, I feel like I should take the opportunity, since we're in Kansas City right now. We're here in the Draft City. We are going to KC Bier Co tonight.
That's right.
7 to 9 p.m. local. So if you're a Chiefs fan, you're watching this right now, and you want to come thank us for our service, for giving you a lecture, KC Bier Co, BIER, spelled the German way.
Yes.
7 to 9 p.m. local. We're going to be there, having brews, talking football, all that kind of stuff.
Beer specials, food specials, giveaways. We're going to have a good time.
All of it. We got a Q&A stream coming up in a few hours over on the Bootleg Football channel. And then, is today Wednesday?
Today is indeed Wednesday, my friend.
Thursday night, tomorrow night, Bootleg Football Podcast channel. We are live for every single pick, giving analysis on every single pick. By then, we will be loaded up with beer and pizza and all that kind of stuff. We have no food here right now. We will fix that. I think that wraps it up for us.
It was just a few things that we shared with the fans here. I mean, it was a quick little shot.
Yeah, it's just a minor 3-hour mock draft. They get longer every year, I know.
It's like getting ready for a marathon, right? You just building. Except we never taper.
No, this is the first of, I think, 5 straight days of streaming. We're gonna be delirious by the time we get back on the plane. Enjoy the ride. And by the way, did I tell you
you did mention that you put an extra one on Friday.
I have Friday morning on this channel. I'm doing a first round reaction stream for that, and then we're doing the day 2 live stream over on Bootleg. Also, EJ, I don't know if I told you this. I'm working with NFL on basically a feature film where I grade every single pick of the draft.
Every single pick?
I'm grading every single team's full draft. So Saturday afternoon, I'm recording 4 full divisions, and then Sunday morning, I'm recording the other 4, and they're getting this week. But it's going to be like an over an hour long video. So I will have no voice by the end of this week.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's content season, and I'm fucking off for a couple weeks not doing anything.
That's right.
But anyway, again, remember, Q&A stream starting in a few hours, KC Bier Co tonight. And then we got all of our live streams after that. Come by for any and or all of that. We love you all very much. Thank you all for your support. And with that, EJ, let's go get some food.
That sounds like a great idea.